we are proud to announce the launch of WrestleCopia brand and the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, which you can find over at www.wrestlecopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, WrestleCopia.com. You may have heard me mention the WrestleCopia brand in passing on a variety of our shows. You might be asking, what is WrestleCopia? Well, the name derives from the words wrestle, for wrestling, and copia, which is defined as having plenty or an abundance of. It's abundance of wrestling history over at WrestleCopia.com as the podcast network continues to grow with a variety of podcasts. Everything from our show, The Wrestling Memory Grenade, where we take a trip down memory lane to wrestling history's past as we analyze and dissect complete years of wrestling history from your favorite promotions, to Monday Warfare, The Battles Within, an in-depth look and weekly breakdown of the entire Raw vs. Nitro war, to our newest podcast, TR Shocks the World, where host Tom Robinson makes his long-awaited return to the wrestling airwaves. Tom does everything from break down the current product to share inside stories and memories from years gone by. It's discretion advised as TR shocks the world with his strong opinions, hilarious impressions, and so much more. The WrestleCopia News Network is a special feature podcast. You can expect more late-breaking news, timely discussions, and tributes to the fallen legends on future episodes of WCNN. We've also got other podcasts being prepped for their debuts, including a territory-based show we like to call The Money and the Miles. There's an old saying in the world of professional wrestling that nothing in this business is real except the money made and the miles traveled. In this podcast, we discuss the territory era, with shows focusing on everything from show reviews to yearly breakdowns to episodes focusing on some of the rare, lesser-known territories and outlaw promotions of yesteryear that remain an enigma. Stop on over to WrestleCopia.com for all the latest shows and follow us on Twitter at WrestleCopia. That's on Twitter at WrestleCopia for all the latest news and information on the podcast network.
Turn it on and rip the knob off.
Hey guys, we're back again with another episode of the Wrestling Memory Grenade. This is episode 32. I'm your host, Ray Russell. Joining me, Steve Eckstadt, to put a bow on the NWA here in 1989. Welcome back, Steve.
Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. How's the hand doing, buddy?
It's doing okay. It's just the arm that's the problem now. So we'll see. I go back in 4 weeks for a checkup, and at that point, we'll see how the arm's doing. May have to go into the knife again. So we'll see.
Gotta create a new audio bite. Steve Watch, 21. Keep a checkup on you. Guys, this is it. 31 shows in a row. It took us 31 shows to get through 12 months of the NWA. And as we pointed out last week, as Steve said, we really dived into every nook and cranny, everything we could find. And there was things that weren't out there, and we went and we found them anyway. And yeah, we did it, man. And here we are putting a bow on this NWA 1989 year in review and awards show. This is just going to be a fun little show, Steve. I appreciate you making the time to get on here during this WrestleMania week to get this show out in time before WrestleMania.
Yeah, big week ahead, starting tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. I always get pumped for WrestleMania, no matter how bad the build and how bad the card. I don't want to dive too far into it, but I just really think these guys are really going to step their game up. It's the first time in fans in over a year. I think the matches are going to be really, really good, no matter how good they look, how bad they look on paper. I think these guys are going to come to work, so it should be a fun weekend.
Yeah, there's a couple matches that are questionable, no matter how many fans are in attendance, but I agree overall. Hopefully that adrenaline really sets in, and these guys really have something special planned this week for all the fans that are going to be in attendance. But unfortunately, we're not going to be there. We're going to be here, so we're going to do this here, the NWA 1989. It's our contribution to WrestleMania week. So I hope you guys enjoy the show. Before we get going, Steve, you had mentioned something about a free prize giveaway. Are we still doing that?
We're still doing that. I will announce that after we announce what our next show is. That
makes complete sense. In the meantime, remember, guys, in order to participate in the free prize giveaway, all you have to do is go to our Twitter account at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. And follow us. It's that simple. If you follow us, you automatically enter into the free prize giveaway contests. And we'd appreciate a retweet as well. It really helps. We continue to grow that way, and then Steve continues to find better prizes, bigger prizes each and every time. So yeah, absolutely. Follow us on Twitter at Wrestling Grenade.
I was just going to say the hard part is not keeping this stuff for myself.
Steve's been, whatever the opposite of stingy is, giving. Steve's been giving over the course of the last 31 episodes. So there have been some fun things we got out from the Kim Patera McDonald's gift pack all the way to the original, that Lex Luger 8x10, which I would have liked to have had for myself. Lucky guy who grabbed that one. But, well, we'll see what's coming up next. But before we get to that, I do encourage everyone to go over and check out our Patreon account. That's at patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where the tiers start as low as $1. Just donate $1 to show your support. Let us know you're there and let us know you care to keep WrestleCopia up and going. The $2 early bird show gets you all of my show notes for the last 31, well, now 32 episodes of The Grenade, as well as all the episodes of Monday Warfare and beyond. And Steve, I share my screen with Steve. I don't know if you guys know that. I don't know if we mentioned it enough. I share my screen with Steve mostly so that he can hear everything that I'm playing on my sound machine here. But he also peeks into my show notes here as I go through, and I think he'll agree that they're pretty detailed and they're pretty interesting at times.
They're way better than my notes. I'm doing notes as if I'm like recapping the matches and shit, and yours are very detailed. It's always fun to read what you got written down.
And sometimes they're identical to your thoughts. Sometimes our thoughts are identical. So yeah.
I knew we thought alike when it came to wrestling throughout the years that we've talked, but it's crazy. We watch these shows at separate times on our own time, and we get together and we almost have the exact same thoughts when it comes to most of it. It's pretty incredible. But no, definitely worth, what is it, $2 to get some notes? It's definitely worth it because they're very detailed. And if you've already watched the shows and you forgot, you can always just read through the notes and you can find stuff. It's almost like a mini Observer exclusive to NWA 89. It's something that's definitely worth having for sure.
Yeah, and you can actually go back and see how my show notes evolved, because on the early notes in the first several episodes, I was writing down complete sentences of things I wanted to get in, things I wanted to say, and I didn't want to make a mistake because we were just getting going. And as time evolved, it became bullet points because I knew what I was going to say as far as overall. So it's funny how it evolved, and I just kind of hammered away with the bullet points later on. But there's even things in there, little hidden gems, so to speak, things I never brought up or mentioned because they were just kind of glanced over, or maybe we were running long on a show and I just said, we'll 86 that for this week. So it's pretty interesting. And that's only $2. Get you that on our Patreon account. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the all access tier. For $5, you get all of everything that I just mentioned, all of the show notes from Monday Warfare, from the Wrestling Memory Grenade, as well as all those booking sheets. Steve found summer of 89 NWA booking sheets. You can get them right now. Look them. You can download them right on our Patreon account from the all access tier. All you got to do is subscribe at the $5 level. You get to see the list of talent in the city, the guys in charge of the show. It's a pretty cool deal.
Yeah, definitely unique. And I picked me up some copies, so it's something that you don't hardly see these things pop up, whether they're copied or original. And it's very cool to see how they line up the shows, who's going to be where, who's going to be doing what, at what time, and that sort of stuff. Very unique item. And it's funny that it was NWA 89, so fitting, I should say.
Absolutely.
But yeah, very cool item.
Right. And last but not least, as part of that all access tier, that $5, it gets you all of our back episodes of our watch along series. That's all of the WWF and WCW pay-per-views we've done, and the complimentary pieces to the Monday Warfare show from 95 and 96, the Coliseum video shows we've already done, Saturday night's main events, Flair versus Steamboat, again, another complimentary piece to this grenade. It's the 60-minute match from Clash of the Champions 6, and so much more to come. The $5 tier is where it's at, if you ask me. The all-access tier gives you everything I already mentioned, plus all of the watch-along series, and there's tons more coming in the future. Definitely, guys, go check it out over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. And as we conclude the NWA 1989, we won't leave you hanging any longer. It was actually a Twitter exclusive last night. Another reason to follow us at Wrestling Grenade, by the way. But for those who don't have Twitter, I should point out that I've started getting heavily involved in YouTube once again. I've already put up a bunch of videos in regards to, as of yesterday, in regards to the new way we're going, which we'll get to in a second. And I've also launched Facebook. Now, we've had the Facebook account since last summer, and I kind of abandoned it because Twitter seemed to be the way to go. But there's a lot of people on Facebook wondering why we're not on there, Steve. So it's back operational as of this week, but I need you guys to follow us on there, like us on there, so that we can get our own URL. Because until we have something like 25 likes or followers or something like that, we can't have our own URL. It's a bunch of generic numbers and letters and things. So guys, head on over to Facebook, look up the Wrestling Memory Grenade. There's only one. And follow us there, like us there also on Facebook. We're going to get that going. It's going to be just as effective as Twitter. And again, on YouTube, check it out. I already got videos up. And Steve, I know you know where we're going, but a lot of guys who aren't on Twitter, they have no idea. Well, girls too. They have no idea where we're going. So if you're ready, brother, I'll break the big announcement here.
Spill the beans, buddy. No
All right, guys.
Time than the present.
Absolutely. All right, guys. So I promised we would not stick with the NWA/WCW for this next haul. We will go back in time once again, but we'll travel back to WCW. Don't fear for any of the big Crockett fans or the WCW fans. But for right now, we're changing gears, which is a good thing, something completely different. And drum roll, please. The Wrestling Memory Grenade, as of episode 33, that's the next episode, we'll be traveling back in time to the year 1993 and the World Wrestling Federation, the WWF in 1993. And I don't want to say we chose that. Steve, I know that it was a fond year from you. It was one of your peak years when you were really starting to watch the business, so I get that. But it was one of my down years, like where it started declining for me because I watched that 80s, 90 boom period. And so now I'm like, what the hell's happening to this beautiful wrestling company that I loved? I still watched it. Don't get me wrong. I don't want to say this is out of my comfort zone because it's not. Obviously, I lived it. I watched it all. So I know what I'm watching before I even get to it. But at the end of the day, it's not something I go back and watch a lot outside of the pay-per-views. So I'm excited to go back through a lot of this, probably jog a few memories that I've forgotten for years. And I can't wait to hear your take on it as well.
Yeah, I love 1993. It's one of those things. If you lived it, you just accept it for what it is. If you go back in time and let's say you grew up in the Attitude Era and you go back and try to watch anything really from 95 backwards, it's kind of difficult to kind of understand and appreciate what wrestling was all about and what it meant. But for me, 93 was the very first year I watched religiously. I didn't miss an episode. I think I missed one Raw in the first year. And it was the one when Brutus got attacked. I was coming home from my grandparents that night, so I didn't really. It's a 2.5-hour trip, so I missed it. I thought it was not going to be on anyway as a holiday, but that's beside the point. I caught every other show. I got every pay-per-view. I still remember the days of the pay-per-views in my head. I remember what I was doing on those days and everything. So it's one of those things that's really stuck with me. I've watched the pay-per-views 100 times probably. I've watched Raw all the way through at least 4 or 5 times throughout the years, and I really enjoy the year. It's not the best year. I'm not delusional. It's not like I said, it's not the greatest, but there's enough in there that is good. You just got to get to it and find it. And that's what we do here anyway. So the booking and just the change and just what Vince morphed his company into for the future. This was the beginning of it. And so very cool. I love this year. So this is right in my wheelhouse.
From top to bottom, there's some hidden gems in there, some things that people might sleep on that were actually pretty good. There's definitely some solid matches throughout the era, but there's also some bad things, some things so bad that it might be a little fun to discuss. Giant Gonzalez and things of that nature. So it's going to be fun from top to bottom. You take the good with the bad, and you need the bad because it kind of gets you through sometimes, just being able to laugh at some of the nonsense. Like the Giant Gonzalez.
I can't wait till we get to WrestleMania 9.
Talk about taking the good with the bad.
I love it.
There's a little bit of everything.
It's probably up there.
Oh man,
it's probably up there with one of my favorite manias, and it's not because it's a great show. It's just because outside of WrestleMania 7, that's the first one I remember as a kid watching. I didn't get 8 for whatever reason. I remember trying to find the tape or find somebody who recorded the pay-per-view or something so I could see it in 92, but 93 I got it. And like I said, I still remember, when it was over, they had the overrun into the paper, like the second showing of it, like your cable provider may go a little long and you can get some. This is like the longest it ever went. I got through like the middle of the Tatanka Shawn match and I was like, I'm just going to watch it again. And then it cut off. I was like, damn it.
Lucky for us, for the majority of the time I got pay-per-views, the second one was always free when I had to order them. So we got lucky.
Mine just cut off right at the middle of the match. So it was a school night anyway, so I went to bed, but I'm pretty sure I came home and watched it again. So it's just the fondness and the nostalgia of all of it that I can just accept the bad of that show. And it's really not bad. It's just random. It's a lot of random shit.
Well, Johnny Gonzalez is on that show. There's some kind of bad on that show somewhere, Steve. I guarantee.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I agree. It's just, it's bad. And I think that's the problem with most of 93 is, it's just, there's stuff that's on paper that looks really good and you're excited for it, and then it doesn't deliver. You get that quite a bit in 93.
Yeah, we'll save that for next week when we start breaking into the year of the WWF 1993. God, yeah, we'll be tackling that for a good 18, 19, 20 weeks, whatever it takes. I think we're going to try to hammer out as much as we can a month at a time. Obviously, we'll be doing the watch-alongs of the pay-per-views, which is going to be fun. And I think we're going to do the USA specials if we have the time and put those over on Patreon as part of that all-access tier I was talking about. So that should be fun. And then there's also some international shows that WWF did following WrestleMania that aired over in Europe that might be a fun thing to do as well. Maybe one of them is a watch-along, and maybe the others over on Patreon as watch-along. So we'll talk about that as the year gets going with the WWF. But as we get ready to start the year of 1993 in the WWF, we're going to end the year here in the NWA in 1989. And to do that, we got to talk a little bit about the year in review. And I wanted to start off talking about Ric Flair. What a year he had in the discussion. We talked about if it weren't for Steamboat and if it weren't for Funk, who would Flair have worked? How would the NWA have worked out in 1989? Of course, Flair kicks off the year in January. Steamboat arrives, and they do their thing for about 5 months, 4.5 months. And then the Funker turns on Flair. Flair's out for whatever it was, 6, 8 weeks, 10 weeks. I can't really remember what it was now. And he's back in time for the Bash. And that feud with Funk goes all the way through November. And then we're kind of at a stalemate here with the JTEX Corporation by the end of December 1989. What were your thoughts, man, on the main event scene here in the 1989?
Classic matches, beginning to end, really. Flair got lucky twice that guys wanted to come back, and they was able to convince some incredible talent to come back to work with him. I guess it's pretty easy to do when Dusty's out of the picture and Flair's on top. So it's like, hey, do you want to come in and work a trilogy with Ric Flair? Yeah, sure. How much are you going to pay me to do that? Okay, that's easy. I can do that all day.
Yeah, it's a good point you pointed that out, too, because I don't think we see Steamboat if Dusty's still there. I don't see Dusty hiring Steamboat, and I don't see Steamboat wanting to come in because Dusty was the reason Steamboat left Crockett to go to Vince at the beginning of 85.
Yeah, so he got lucky for sure. But yeah, the main event scene, like you said, when you have 3 matches, Flair, Steamboat, 3 or 4 matches?
3, yeah.
That involve Flair, 3 with Flair and Funk, and you got Muta and Sting thrown into there. Just really good. And by the end of the year, you can see Lex Luger making that ascent to that main event status as well. He really, I will say, like after the I Quit match, the main event scene was nothing. There was nothing there because you're building to a shit pay-per-view idea. But Luger really stepped up his game and kind of carried to the finish line the end of the year, to me anyway.
Right.
I felt like he was really getting to that point where he was next in line.
You mentioned Sting in the middle of all that, and that's a really intriguing one because how over do you have to be when you have a guy come in like George Scott who has nothing? Well, Dusty was already doing nothing with Sting to begin with. A lot of people debate that was because Dusty didn't want Sting to be more over than him. Who's to say? But Dusty was really doing not a whole lot with Sting at the end of 88. Then George Scott took over, and we know what happened then, nothing. Sting literally did nothing for the next 6 months, the first 6 months, first half of year. What a waste of talent, first of all. Sting, your top 2 or 3 highest paid wrestler on the roster, and you do nothing with him for the first 6 months of the year. And then you wouldn't know it, though, because of how over he was with those fans. He was just insanely over no matter what he was doing, whether it was wrestling Butch Reed or having those terrible, terrible promos that went absolutely nowhere where he was wanting to have fun. And then all of a sudden, boom, it clicks. The committee comes in, the booking committee, and he's feuding with Funk at the same time Flair is. They're doing those matches, having those wild brawls on the syndicated TV. And then eventually, he's doing the stuff with Muta at the Bash, which actually lasts all the way through basically the rest of the year with JTEX and whatnot. So Sting had a nothing happened in first 6 months, and he was basically main eventing or semi-main eventing the final 6 months, but he was over the entire time.
Yeah, pretty incredible too. I mean, like you said, he was given shit for really, like you said, half the year. Then all of a sudden, Great Muta came in and caught fire immediately. And it's like, okay, we got to get this guy in there with Sting. It felt like that was logical. So, yeah, it's just the booking committee is really. It's unfortunate Flair wasn't there the whole time running the show because that year would have been insane. You saw how good it was for the 6 months that he did it for us.
Right.
Just imagine if he had a whole year to turn things around, how much you'd be cooking with gas towards the end there. Yeah, stupid booking at the beginning of the year. Totally. George Scott is trash.
Yeah, you don't want to talk. We can't talk about the main event and the semi-main event without talking about your boy, United States Heavyweight Champion, two-time United States Heavyweight Champion, total package Lex Luger. Luger had quite the year. The whirlwind of a year. First, he's babyface on the way in. He just come off Starrcade 88 where he couldn't secure the world title from Ric Flair, and the story was that he couldn't get another title match once he had that. They would do that again in 93, obviously, so that should be fun, doing this all over again. But basically, Luger wasn't supposed to have another world title shot, so they had to find other things for him to do throughout the course of 1989. Of course, he comes in a babyface, feuds with Barry Windham briefly, beats Barry Windham in a hell of a match, but it only went 10, 11 minutes. And I think it was Barry Windham was injured. I don't remember if it was his wrist or what the deal was. They still had a hell of a match. Yeah, that's right. It was his hand. That's right. Because he punched that post out there to sell it and bladed it and whatever. Things guys will do. But they dropped the U.S. title to Luger, and they were having the damnedest match. If they could have went 20 minutes, oh my God, it would have been like, we would have been talking about the top 5 match of the year, I would imagine. But it's just too short, but it's still a very good match. Then, of course, Luger does the heel turn. Well, he drops the belt. I know you probably wanted me to forget this, but he drops the belt to Michael Hayes, I think just so they can recreate the Freebirds. I really feel that's what it was all about. Turn Hayes heel. They had Hayes turn heel on Luger during a match with the Wyndhams at the Omni. And then Hayes takes the belt when Terry Gordy returns and helps him get the win. 3 weeks later on TV, Luger gets the belt back, so you see where that went. And it was smooth sailing from there. He turned heel. Over the summer, he got pissed off that Steamboat and other guys were getting opportunities with Flair, and he wasn't. He was the number 1 contender. And so he turns heel on Steamboat. They have a hell of a match at the Bash, and they're slated to feud through the fall. But old Bonnie Steamboat says, no, and hubby quits the company or gets fired, depends on who you ask. So that was unfortunate, and that's where there was a lull in the career in 1989 year of Lex Luger. He's basically feuding with Tommy Rich, and I used air quotes there, guys, for August, September, October, at least 3 months, maybe 4 months, with Tommy Rich. But it wasn't really a feud. They didn't do anything. They had a couple matches on TV. The Clash match was actually very good. The best, probably I would say easily the best Tommy Rich match all year, possibly.
Yeah, I would agree. And credit to Lex Luger for actually getting a good match out of Tommy Rich in September, wasn't it? So towards the end, the last week of NWA that we talked about, right? It's like finally he started getting decent Tommy Rich, and it was at the end. But for Luger to get something decent out of Rich in September says enough about how his year went, how good he was doing. Pillman was a lifesaver for him, for sure. Yeah,
coming off the Tommy Rich. And it didn't hurt that Flair gave them angles, too, to work with.
Yeah, for sure. That always helps. He kind of disappeared with Rich just because it was more of a house show loop type deal than TV.
That's really all it was.
Because they knew how bad it was going to be.
It was like those WWF summer feuds, the house show tour feuds. Yeah. You see you see the angle leading into it, and then you never see the matches. Or in this instance, you really didn't see anything, though. Yeah, except that Clash match. But yeah, Luger got saved by Pillman there at the end, and then obviously, I will say though the difference between it's not the difference, but him and Sting, when he turned heel, he was able to you could do whatever you wanted with him, and he was over. He was getting boos, he was getting cheers. It didn't matter what he did, and I know he had some fun matches like on Power Hour with Dick Murdoch. His selling was getting better, so he was just doing little things to really enhance himself and keep himself over to the point where it didn't matter who he was working, because he wasn't really doing anything until Pillman came around, and he really saved him. Luger had a great year. Yeah, so outside of that little Tommy Rich fiasco there in the later summer, early fall, he had Pillman, as you said, at Halloween Havoc, and then again at the Clash in November, the New York Knockout. And then, of course, he begins feuding with Flair. He wants that world title. He wants his former friend Sting. Luger wants the whole world. He's got the whole world in his hands. I think Ric Flair was saying there at the end of the show, end of the year, I think Luger was the one that wanted the whole world in his hands. He was U.S. champion, but he wanted everything else as well. Starts wrestling Sting on TV. He's working both guys, obviously, at Starrcade and Muda, which That was a show. I haven't watched, sat down and physically watched that fucking show from beginning to end in nearly 30 years. And that blew my mind how good. And it was just working the leg and working the body parts and things like that. And it was Muta, who knows how to have a good match. But the Luger Muta match really surprised me. It wasn't like a classic because it was more working a hold or working a body part, but it was still really good for what it was.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, his selling really, really picked up and did excellent towards the end. Like before, it was just a lot of promos, and he was just going in there just destroying guys. Luger was doing different things in the ring, just experimenting with moves and finishes. I know he beat people with the superplex for a little bit. He beat him with clotheslines. He was just doing things to change. Instead of doing the same thing over and over, he just changed it up enough to keep you noticing. I thought he did excellent throughout the year.
Yeah, we'll have more on Luger before we close the show. Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express, we'll talk about them for a minute because they were kind of in that Steamboat and where they had nothing to do for a while and then it picked up at the end. But they came in hot. They came in off that big hot angle against Paul E. Dangerously and his original Midnight Express of Randy Rose and Dennis Condrey. The problem was as the feud continued, George Scott took over. He saw nothing in Randy Rose. He wanted to get rid of Randy Rose, but keep Dennis Condrey. So Dennis Condrey says, well, what am I doing? Well, we don't know what you're doing. We'll keep you, though. Dennis Condrey didn't like that. And he was already notorious for just leaving out of nowhere. I mean, he did it to Cornette and Bobby Eaton one night, and they had to go find Stan Lane. Well, actually, I think their first choice was actually Tom Pritchard, but they couldn't get a hold of him. So Stan Lane ended up being the other member of the Midnights, replacing Dennis Condrey. So he's done it before to people he actually got along with. So to be upset with the booker or whomever, Jim Herd, George Scott, whatever it was, he left town. And they're stuck with Randy Rose, the guy they didn't even want, who they keep around just because he was, a good all-around guy. And then Jack Victory comes in and he has to replace Dennis Condrey. And then it's not the feud anymore. It's kind of over. And the angles stopped, but the promos continued. And even Cornette and Paulie, as good as they were, they just became repetitive week after week. You pointed that out quite a bit as well. But it started hot. It was a decent feud. And then they kind of morph into an SST feud. But there's also contract issues at that time. Jim Herd wants to cut the Midnights from $250,000 contracts to $150,000 contracts. And the Midnights weren't so sure about that. And so all three guys, Corny and the Midnights, take some time off there right as they start a feud with the SST. They come back. They continue that into the summer with the War Games, where it's the Midnights teaming with Doc and the Roadies against the SST and the Freebirds there. So it wasn't like a hardcore blood feud of any sort, at least in regards to the Midnights. It was with the Roadies. They continue to stay relevant to a degree, I guess the best way I can say it, and then they kind of just nothing. Once the War Games were over at the Bash, it was like nothing. I believe the Midnights were being thrown into matches with the Skyscrapers following the Bash, which Cornette called the worst matches in the Midnight Express's history as a tag team. And I don't doubt that.
Yeah, talk about clash of styles. I don't know how the Midnight's offense just does not work with a bruising team like that. I just don't see how that would work. I mean, it could work with the Road Warriors to a degree just because they're not nearly as tall. They're just muscular, But those Skyscrapers being nearly 7 foot tall and you doing high lows and things like that just ain't going to work. So
well, Sid Vicious isn't selling for Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane. And Stan Lane isn't taking any power bombs. So I can't imagine what Bobby Eaton went through during those house show matches. I can't even imagine what poor Bobby went, but at least he made it out the other side.
He probably made it look as good as he could. I'll tell you that.
Cornette tells a story all the time during that feud, the house show loop, where the Midnights needed to get away from the Skyscrapers, but they couldn't beat them up. And Cornette admitted that it's not realistic. So Bobby kept raking Sid's eyes and Sid kept no selling it and raking Bobby's eyes because Sid didn't want to sell for Bobby. Finally, Sid, I think Sid goes, "The hell are you doing?" And Bobby goes, "Damn it, Sid, I'm fucking trying to get away from you. Like, fucking sell the eye rake so I can go." So it's just, you're dealing with a green Sid Vicious. It's never, thank God it was just an eye rake spot, But,
right.
But at least by the end there, Cornette got into the booking committee with Kevin Sullivan and, of course, Ric Flair, the head of the booking committee, and boom, magic was made. I can't believe I'm saying this, between the Midnights and the Dynamic Dudes. And the reason for that is A, Cornette's on the booking committee now, and B, they're the two teams, probably the four people that Jim Herd hates the most on the entire roster, or I think hates is too strong of a word. He sees nothing in them. He doesn't like the dude's gimmick, and he thinks the Midnight's, Bobby has no body, and they're just too small. So Jim Herd really doesn't even want these guys on his show. So it's kind of funny that Cornette was able to book a masterful storyline that was just so intriguing week after week after week. No matter, even if the dudes were involved.
Yeah, the dudes ain't the greatest. They suck. But just being able to have angles and meaning behind the matches, it can really go a long way and hide any faults in the talent. I mean, if you go look and watch Smoky Mountain Wrestling, Dirty White Boys no great wrestler, but those angles week after week with like Tim Horner and all those guys, it just made you want to tune in and watch and see where it goes. I'm not paying to see the matches. I just want to see the angles, and that's what this was. I wanted to see what the dudes were going to do next to get the one up on the Midnights and Cornette, and I wanted to see how Cornette was going to sell it. So that's what kept you intrigued. It wasn't the matches. It was just where they're going next with the angles. So that's what was good about it, not the matches.
So Corny and the Midnights came into 89 on fire, and they left. I don't want to say on fire because the feud kind of abruptly ended there when Shane Douglas tried to keep it real. Well, he found out anyway. But yeah, it was still a very, very great weekly episodic storyline that Cornette was telling. It wasn't just like a one angle feud or a 2-angle feud. Like something was happening almost every week, and it was really, really cool.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
We go on to the Road Warriors. We'll talk a little bit about the Road Warriors. They didn't like doing jobs, Steve, but they did drop the World Tag Team titles to the Varsity Club. And that was a fun little surprise. I didn't really know a whole lot about that Roadies Varsity feud. And remember, the Roadies had turned heel based on Dusty's booking briefly before going into 89, but the fans didn't want to boo the Road Warriors. That was Dusty's idea, to get Dusty back on top and to get sympathy on Dusty, which didn't really work, as you can see. But Dusty got fired from booking because of that angle, because he bled on TV. And because of that, he eventually quit just a few weeks later. And so we wind up with the Varsity Club coming after the Road Warriors belts, but the Roadies are still heels. And for like the first month, they tried to sell it like we got two mobs. I think the way Kevin Sullivan or Jim Ross or somebody tried to sell it on commentary, two evil mobs going at one another. But eventually it was just obvious. I think by February, the Roadies were full-blown faces, if not by the beginning of March. They were just full-blown faces again. It was like when Shawn turned heel to fight Hogan at SummerSlam. Hogan left the next day. All right, it's over. We're back. And it was kind of like, Dusty's gone. All right, we're baby faces again. Let's forget that experiment ever happened. But it was intriguing, like you pointed out last week, that forgotten piece of the angle that was shot at the studio during that feud, the attack of the Varsity Club on the Roadies and Paul Ellering and things. It really enhanced the whole feud. It really made the feud. That feud meant a whole lot more when we were sitting there dissecting all of the TV and everything than it ever did to me prior to this.
Yeah, I had no clue about that angle on, what was it, Championship Wrestling, the Saturday morning edition.
Saturday morning show, yeah.
That kind of disappeared at the end of February, I think, or beginning of March. But no, it was cool to see that because it added some intrigue into that feud. It felt like it was more of a brawl type deal that we got at that clash. It really enhanced it and made it more meaningful for me. I know a little bit of the feud, not a lot. So seeing that was pretty cool. It really just one of those missing pieces that a lot of people don't even talk about. Not many people talk about the Roadies and Varsity Club feud these days, but if you are interested in that and knowing that this is out there, to see that angle, and it's not like it's a great angle, man. One of them gets popped in the back with a bar stool type deal, and it's pretty rough. They're going at it, so it's a really, really good angle. It's almost like they just destroyed the set a little bit because they probably knew it was the end of the Saturday morning show, but I know it's the same TV that they used before. So, yeah, good stuff.
Then, of course, by the time that ended, after the Roadies dropped the belts because Teddy Long had turned heel, evil referee Teddy Long turned heel and helped cost the Roadies the World Tag titles. The Varsity Club win the World titles. The Roadies go on a feud with the Freebirds and the SST over the course of the summer. Of course, that's part of that War Games we were talking about. They had a lot of, there was a cage match. I think it was supposed to be the Roadies. Was it against the SST? And they no-show, and they have to fight the Birds. So then we get the Marietta Massacre, and it's the Birds and the SST bloodying up Hawk and wiping it on Animal, and there's your storyline for the entire summer. And then the Roadies kind of disappear, really, for a little bit there. and they're back in time to feud with the Skyscrapers, but unfortunately Sid goes and gets the punctured lung and the rib injury, and he's out after the match with the Steiners at the Clash in November. Of course, Skyscrapers missed Starrcade because of that. So the feud abruptly ends at that point. Well, it doesn't end because they continue it with Mark Callis and then Mike Enos even. So it seemed like the Roadies were getting ready to have, it's that immovable force versus the irresistible, or is it the irresistible force? Yes. And the immovable object. It's really what it was with the Roadies and the Skyscrapers, but we only got that one match.
Yeah, the problem is it was Hawk that was out. Animal was doing like 2-second squashes for that little stretch there. We didn't know where Hawk went. I don't know. Like the Road Warriors were awesome at the beginning of the year. I felt like shortly after Animal died, it was kind of like leading up to that point. Like I was like, man, I forgot how good these guys were, and they were selling and doing things for the varsity club and that sort of stuff. But by the end of the year, it's just kind of like you can see where the issues lie. With the Road Warriors, just having a gimmick that strong, they never really changed it up. And by the end of the year, when it's just like rinse, wash, repeat for them with their feuds. It's just new teams come in, they fight the Roadies beat them up, and that's the end of it. It never really changed. And
when you do 2 pinfall jobs in the matter of the last 5 years, the crowd should already pretty much know what to expect when they get a Roadies match. You're either going to win or this is going to be a bullshit finish. It's so good point there too. Yeah. Well, it's that time. It's been a long time, but it's time once again for
Steiner Watch 89.
Oh my God, I haven't heard that in a long time, Steve. Like at least 20 some odd weeks. We started this thing 31 episodes ago, and one of the things we decided we were going to do was have Steiner Watch 89 and kind of try to see when the wheels fell off for the initial Rick Steiner push, the one where the crowd was really starting to get behind him, shake the arena. The crowd where Ric Flair wanted to, or where Dusty Rhodes wanted Rick Steiner to beat Ric Flair for the world title at Starrcade 88 before Flair went and bitched to Crockett and got the match, I don't even know, I want to say changed because I don't think it ever was actually in the works, but made sure it didn't happen. And we ended up getting Luger, which is probably the better match wrestling-wise, but the crowd was just ready to pop for Rick Steiner. Going into the year, he was just so over, it was insane. And he eventually gets the TV title. He's feuding with the Varsity Club, obviously coming in after splitting off from them last year. He did so much, and then enter George Scott, who just had no idea how to book 1980s wrestling. Some people are starting to question if he knew how to book 1970s wrestling. A lot of guys who aren't fans of his say that he just kind of fell into the right place at the right time. He gets called up to Crockett to book, and then he looks around the locker room, and it's Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, Tony Atlas, Masked Superstar. It's a slew of, if you fuck that up, man, you got to be a really terrible booker. So I don't know that it was so much his booking as it was just the talent. And obviously, yes, things were much slower then. There wasn't hot angles every week back then and all that good stuff too. But man, we'll get to the bookers here in a couple minutes, but he tried his best to put the fucking brakes on Rick Steiner here early on.
Yeah, that's no lie. But I will say, Steiner Watch didn't last very long. That's how good Rick Steiner was in 1989. He overcame whatever bullshit was thrown his way. The crowd stayed in love with him. Me and you always commented, like, it seemed like each week he was doing something new. For like the first 4 or 5 months of 89, he was doing like something new every match to just remind you that he's nuts. And
very creative. I'm sure he came up with a lot of it himself. I'm sure other people threw ideas at him as well, but oh my God, just every week something new. And it was like that all the way to the end. It wasn't as often, but he was still, it was like the last few weeks with the last episode we just did, he was still doing shit, dropping elbows on nothing and pinning the guy.
Yeah. And it's not like he's doing it in a manner that's over the top ridiculous. It fit in and it wasn't overdone. It didn't happen all the time. And it's impeccable, his timing. Like, he knows exactly when he needs to do it and when he doesn't need to do it. And he doesn't do any of this dumb stuff in the matches with Doom and that sort of stuff. He may start off, like the Bushwhackers do, and do a little gimmick at the beginning, but once the match gets going, that stuff's out the window, and he's a beast of a wrestler.
Yeah, that's no doubt. Definitely one of the most enjoyable guys to watch throughout the entire year. I never once said, oh no, a Rick Steiner match. Never once. no matter
Oh
who he was
no,
in there with.
we're looking forward to this.
In fact, I was, we see, here comes Lex Luger, but he's taking on Tommy Rich. You might even groan a little, so you're like, oh no, not Tommy Rich. But with Rick Steiner, it was the opposite. It was like, oh, Rick Steiner and Iron Sheik. Yes. And I was salivating. How is he going to handle this one? Because Rick Steiner didn't play no shit. Like, he wasn't going to let a match suck. And that's why I loved him so much. So he comes in a potential at one point heavyweight champion. Now, he wasn't a main eventer, but that's just what Dusty wanted to do to get him to that level. Of course, he does, get the TV title, feuds with the Varsity Club. They stick him back with Eddie Gilbert, the old First Family from the UWF. And that's kind of when George Scott did that. That was kind of when both guys, Eddie and Rick Steiner, got cooled off a little bit. And it was questionable for a few weeks. What the hell's he doing? These guys are doing nothing. It was kind of like Sting. They were doing nothing all of a sudden. And it was getting a little scary just for a bit. But then George Scott's gone, and boom, enter Scott Steiner, brother Scott. Now, they weren't teaming initially. Scotty was doing some singles, working with some of the undercard guys. But eventually, before the Bash, and I think it was an injury to Eddie Gilbert that allowed Scott to step in and team with Rick, because Rick and Eddie had won the U.S. tag titles, and then Eddie got injured almost immediately after that. Something, I think it was a knee injury. And so they just vacated the belts for the rest of the year. U.S. tag titles were no more. And next thing you know, Scotty's with Rick, and oh man, the rest is history. You talk about the Robin Green storyline throughout the summer. Boy, what a long playing angle that was to get to Woman and Doom and Nitron and all that good stuff. So Rick Steiner had a hell of a year.
Indeed he did. And he busted his ass, man. That's another thing that we never really discussed with this. We never really talked about. I know we mentioned, they kind of just disappear. But some of these lower level title belts just kind of did nothing. Like Muda won the TV title and then it's never defended again.
It was very
the U.S.
few
tag team titles are gone. Like, they just disappear. Now, if you look at the wrestling wrap-ups from '89, they do like a little page of champions, and the U.S. tag team champions are still there, and there's a picture of Eddie and Rick Steiner, and this is like the October issue or the November issue of I think it's even December. It goes all the way through the end of the year.
The magazine guys, oh man, amazing.
So they're still there, even though they're not even defending the belts or anything. So
right, and then the belts will return as part of a tournament won by Zenk and Pillman in February of '90 over the Birds. That feud will continue on.
So that's something that we didn't really discuss. I know we mentioned it in passing, but unless you was the U.S. champion or the world champion, your belts didn't really matter.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate because the TV title did mean something.
The Birds had them and basically did nothing.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, when the Birds were world tag team champions, that was pretty. And it wasn't just because they sucked. It was really just they didn't really do a lot with them.
They didn't have anybody because all the top teams that they would feud with were feuding with each other. So it's like they were the champions were the bottom of the totem pole with nobody to work with.
Which is why the Birds had the belts for as long as they did. The belt, I should say, the belt. One of the world tag title belts went missing there at one point in 1989 and didn't return until the Steiners closed the year as champions. So Rick Steiner walks in from potential world champion to a TV champion to U.S. tag team champion to world tag team champion. By the end of '89, he held pretty much every belt except for the U.S. title. And he had a big match with Luger at the Omni for that as well. So Rick Steiner is a hell of a year, man. A hell of a year.
Yep.
And now we'll talk about the variety of elephants in the room. We'll talk about the booking committee over the course of 1980. Holy shit. What a dumpster fire that was at times. We close out 88. Dusty Rhodes was the booker for years. For years, baby. I was on top, booking all the good wrestlers and stuff, all the great matches, if you will. But Dusty pissed off the wrong people once Turner took over, and he found himself without a booking job. But they let him stay on as a wrestler, supposedly knowing that he would quit because the ego. And thus, Dusty did quit about a week into 1989, so we saw very little Dusty Rhodes, which by that era, it's probably a good thing, Steve. And then in the NWA anyway. I don't mind me some 1990 Dusty, but... so Dusty's on the way out. We learn in December that they've already hired Jim Herd to come in, George Scott to come in, but they're not in yet, so Jim Crockett is the interim booker for about a month. The problem is Jim Crockett's a promoter, not a booker. He knows how the business is ran, but he's not great at sitting there and coming up with storylines and this, that, and the other. So he knows the basics, but he's happy to hand the reins over to, well, not happy because I guess he didn't really get along with George Scott during this tenure, but Crockett gives the book over to George Scott, who proceeds for the next 3 months to do everything you could possibly do to kill a company. People always argued the NWO were sent over by Vince. He paid him off to kill the company. You could argue in 1989, Vince paid off Jim Herd to hire George Scott to fucking come in and kill NWA because he did his damnedest for about 3 months there, refusing to promote the Clash of the Champions on TV. Didn't even allow them to say the name of the show. It was that show in New Orleans, if you remember that, Steve. They weren't even allowed to say Clash of the Champions.
I remember we made fun of it when, what was it, Wrestle War came up. Like, oh, they actually mentioned the name like 6 weeks out. What the hell is this?
Because George Scott was gone. That was another thing. He didn't want to sell the pay-per-views. He didn't. His belief was all the money was made on the house shows, which was still true to a large scale. They were still making shit tons of money. Well, Vince was still making shit tons of money by 89 in the house shows. So the business was still there, but your money's also in pay-per-view and TV by this point. And he didn't get that. He was still way behind the times. And he didn't want to announce that Steamboat was going to wrestle Ric Flair on Clash of the Champions to get that big rating for the channel that is owned by the guy that also owns your fucking wrestling organization, you dip fuck. And because of that, it's debatable. I've heard various stories from various credible people. One of them's right. It doesn't really matter, I suppose, but he was fired either the day of the Clash or the day after the Clash. It's really irrelevant. He was fired because of the way he handled that Clash, which drew next to nothing in ratings based on what it should have done, and it drew next to nothing in a crowd in the Superdome because he wouldn't advertise it on TV.
Moron.
Steamboat and Flair go an hour, and nobody's there to see it. Doesn't make a sound.
It's like if a tree falls in the forest, did it really happen?
That's right.
Nobody heard it. It's unfortunate. I mean, glad they had camera guys there to record it. Utter ridiculous.
Well, we had fun calling that match when we did that for the Patreon, for sure. That was a hell of a match.
Yeah, it was. It's probably my favorite one out of the three. But the only saving grace for George Scott is he never adjusted with the times. I mean, his philosophy back in the 70s and all that stuff is you sell the house show. There is no such thing as a pay-per-view or a big TV special. Those sort of things. You got to sell the house, so you can't give anything away on TV or nobody's going to come to see it.
And that's what he did. He gave nothing away. There were 3 months. I think that's why we knocked out 3 and 4 weeks of TV at a time. There were no angles. There was nothing to discuss. It was just, Junkyard Dog wrestled. Well, Chopper wrestled.
Yeah, so that's really the only reason behind that. He just never adjusted with the times. And even he worked in WWF, right? He was during the Hogan at the beginning, right?
Yeah, he's the one that got Steamboat. He had his group of people, so that's how you saw Steamboat and guys like that coming in there during that era. Yeah, George Scott was around probably somewhere around the end of somewhere in 84, I would guess, through 86, because I know he brought in I know he didn't bring in Savage, but I know Lanny Poffo said he was promised a push, and then George Scott got fired, and that's why he became a job guy, and yada, yada. So, he was there throughout that era, though. Yeah, you'll see his name on a lot of the early Coliseum videos and things.
Yeah, so he was just probably a pawn in the game for Vince to get people to come over from Crockett. That's probably what he was there for. So I think a lot of these guys together, they could probably come up with something good, but working by themselves, it's probably a little bit more difficult for them. Yeah,
and so that's why after the firing of George Scott, we get the original booking committee, which is like Jim Ross and Jim Herd, and it's a slew of guys. It's I think Eddie Gilbert was on the original booking committee and things like that. So it was immediate. I don't know if you remember that far back, but it was immediate. It was so it was like watching a different company. Almost like within 2 weeks of Scott's firing TV, it just felt like a different company. Everything was fast and moving and hot paced and storylines and hot angles like the old Mid-South and the old Crockett, and it was really great shit throughout the course of the summer, which is why the Bash was so hot. Everything on it meant something.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it numerous times. Just when a match matters, even if you have 1 or 2 small angles leading up to it for your opener, it means something, and it makes people want to see that match. I mean, you just don't want to throw things together with nothing there, and it was a complete polar opposite. It was like night and day. I do remember that even the squashes were faster. Because remember, I was always complaining about how slow these squash matches are, and going 5 or 6 minutes of rest holds and doing absolutely nothing.
Right.
Because I think there was an edict from George Scott where they couldn't do like high flying moves and all that stuff. You got to save it for the house and things like that. So once he was gone, like even the squash matches got better. So yeah, you could tell a difference, huge difference.
And the committee did a great job. If you're already a wrestling fan and you're watching it, you're really enjoying it. But unfortunately, it wasn't drawing back all the fans that Dusty lost and George Scott lost. The ratings were still dismal. They were probably the lowest they'd ever been, at least in years, if not maybe possibly ever. Even with the better booking, it was just hard to get people back. And that's when Ric Flair basically threatened to quit unless he got the book. And he got the book. And he became the head of the booking committee, and eventually Eddie Gilbert got canned out of that due to some issues and things. But brought in were Jim Cornette and Kevin Sullivan, who I think kind of already had a little bit of hands in it, but they were brought in as Flair's right-hand men as far as booking the TV and following through with whatever Rick wanted them to do as far as the storyline, what needed to be done next. And it was, you can't really argue with the ratings. Not only began to go back up, but they were hitting new records, or at least the highest records of 1989 near the end of the year.
Yeah, and for good reason. I know that the Final Bash. I was hoping they had a good house because they really busted their ass to sell that show and get the matches over and meaningful. And so it was definitely like the top guys, and the guys were working hard no matter what the situation was. So you want to see them get rewarded for the effort they're putting into it.
So often we would look at the card because it wasn't WWF. There wasn't an A, a B, and a C show. There was one show. So it was stacked. It was, Sting, it's like Luger versus, I'm just making this up, but it would be like Flair and Funk and Sting and Luger and the Roadies and the SST and some kind of a gimmick cage match. And, this versus that. It was from top to bottom. It was like every one of these matches is like at least a semi-main event. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, and you're drawing like 2,000 people. What the hell is going on? And it really wasn't the booking. It wasn't the lack of talent or the hard work. It was just getting those eyes back and the angles and the storylines and things. And Ric Flair really turned that around at the end of the year. So that was the year in review part of the show, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed that, kind of reliving some of the history of some of the main players here, the booking committee, and of course, some of the wrestlers who were very relevant throughout 1989. Before we get into the awards and whatnot, I do want to give special thanks to a few people here. It all started on the Retro Network, theretronetwork.com. You can follow the Retro Network at TRN Social. Got to thank Jason, Mickey, and the crew over there for giving us the ball and allowing us to do what we wanted to do, create the Wrestling Memory Grenade way back in, I think it was July. And boy, we took it, and almost immediately, if you go back to the first episode, the first sentence out of my mouth is, I said the grenade's part of the WrestleCopia brand, which that was always the idea. It was always the plan to build a brand as far as the podcast goes and things of that nature. And it took off faster than I thought. And by, I think, episode 9, we were on WrestleCopia. So, but it all started with TRN giving us a place to start and kind of learn how everything works and get us going there. So I appreciate you guys and everything you guys did to give us that place to start with as we continued to grow. Got to thank Richard Land, the Landman out there. He's at Masked Wrestlers. That's MASKED Wrestlers on Twitter. Without Richard, we'd be without a lot of these missing episodes that nobody's ever seen before. Me and Steve were really just on a hunt, finding it ourselves, going through my own tapes, and I whipped out a ton from, I think, June and July myself of my old recordings and found in some other places, and we filled in a lot of missing gaps that nobody else seemed to have, but Richard Land, at least from September to December of 1989, was a great saving grace. He found a lot of missing, specifically TBS shows, but even a couple of worldwide. So I got to thank him very much for all he did for us. Yeah. And we definitely had the
Power Hour.
Yes, the Dick Murdoch and Luger Power Hour.
Between Dick and
I don't know what I was going to do. I just felt in my heart after we had that Luger and Dick Murdoch match. It was so good, and the second one wasn't even as good as the first, but I needed that conclusion. No. I needed that closure in my life. And it was like, dude, if I can't find this, that's my new holy grail. As silly as that sounds, that was going to be my new holy grail. So thank God. Thank you. Absolutely, Steve. Good call. Thanks, Richard Land, for, I don't remember what week that was, but finding that Power Hour, the rematch between Dick Murdoch and Lex Luger. So that was very, very cool. But We also got to thank a lot of the talent that was involved and maybe indirectly involved with the company in 1989. Got to thank first and foremost Missy Hyatt. Now, some of the other guys retweeted things or responded to us from time to time, but Missy Hyatt was, every time I had a legitimate comment, thought, question, she would respond. And I have to thank her so much for doing that for us, especially with all the I had going on throughout the year for her. But she was so cool. She started chiming in a lot throughout the summer, talking about that feud with Eddie Gilbert and the Great Muta, how it was an honor to be, in the feud. And she talked about being misted by Muta 2 different occasions and things. I know our fault with that was she didn't sell it after the fact. But my God, what a great story at the time. And I can't believe they allowed the man-on-woman violence back then. I guess they got away with it because it was just green spray. But man, she sold that like $1 million initially when it happened. And what a great job. And of course, into the fall, she talked about the politics, Eddie Gilbert being removed from the booking committee, basically Eddie being forced to do, as we saw, basically become a jobber to some degree. Yeah. And Missy eventually being taken off TV, even managing the Steiners. After September, October, somewhere around that area, she got taken off TV and was told she was too fat for television, the way she worded it. And she said it messed with her mind. But of course, she divorced Eddie, I think by the end of the year. And lo and behold, they had room for her again. She returns and the rest is history. We know Missy Hyatt throughout 90, 91, 92 was there. So, but thank you so much, Missy Hyatt, for everything you did as far as filling us in on the politics. That was intriguing. There's stuff I didn't know. And then just talking about, hanging or doing the angle with Muta. Also, big thank you to Jim Cornette because he indirectly got us so many of our followers over the course of a few of the videos we posted. I posted the video of the skyscrapers beating the shit out of Mike Blackwell, the dog of war, remember? When he tried to no-sell the skyscrapers and found out. Corny retweeted that and kind of gave a little more detail about, you should have seen what happened. If you think that was bad, you should have seen what happened when he got to the locker room. But I mean, he was serious though. There was no joke. So I just maybe, I appreciate that. And just discussing some of the Dudes of Midnight stuff. He retweeted a lot of our stuff, got more eyeballs on our show. And like I said, indirectly, he also, expanded on some other things. So really appreciate that. He talked about the spot. Remember the spot where the Midnights launched Trent Knight in the air and he just landed on Doc's hands, like the immaculate reception in wrestling. And Corny, gave the insight to that. We just said, "Hey Doc, can you do this?" And he just smiled and said, "Yeah." So I love that response too. Corny remembering that spot and telling it again for our show. Jim Ross, retweeting some things with his commentary, talking about what it was like, commenting on the Lee Scott backdrops and things of that nature. Terry Funk, which I know he doesn't run his own Twitter account, but I know he follows it, and he's the one that basically gives the high sign as to what to do on it. Recently had whomever is in control of that account to retweet one of his promos that I posted and I commented on and put it over. And thank you very much, Terry Funk. You're a true legend. And, I know your health's not great right now, so wish you all the best, my friend. You are a true. I don't know if they have a word above legend, but you are that, my friend, Terry Funk. And then, of course, I can't forget Lex Luger, Steve, because there was the match with, I think it was Ranger Ross, where Lex goes up to the middle rope. I think he was trying to clothesline or something, and then he slips and...
Ow! Right in the schnoz!
Takes the bump right in the schnoz. And so I go, you know what? I don't really, I haven't really interacted with Lex Luger on Twitter before, but I'm going to post this. I'm going to tag Lex in it and see what we get. And lo and behold, Luger responds back with a smiley face. He's basically laughing at himself. And that was so cool to see. Deep down, I truly believe that, like we've talked about so many times, the man has changed. He's a different guy. I've never seen anybody change like that, to be frank with you. Not just in wrestling, just within the world, to be so humble and such a different human being. But I said, you know what? I'm going to see if he responds to this, because this is my proof. I need a proof or something, but so this is my proof. And then he laughs at himself, and that was pretty cool. So, and then I actually had one of the other followers that listened to our show. He said, "Oh my God, Lex Luger responded to you." So he was pumped for that as well. So that was pretty cool. We also had follows from Teddy Long, Sergeant Slaughter, likes from guys like Fatu, Hurricane Helms, the Great Muta. Liked a lot of the shit that we posted that involved the Great Muta. So no shocker there. Dutch Mantel, chimed in a few times on some of the videos I posted. So I want to thank all those guys. I want to thank Conrad Thompson, the interview he did with Jim Hurd because that was a hell of a lot of information once that came out that we utilized for the fall and going forward from the fall of 1989 in the NWA. Sean Oliver's kayfabe commentaries with Jim Cornette when he did the NWA 1989 timeline. Got a few trinkets of fun stuff there near the end of the year. Of course, you know the story about Shane from last episode that Jim told on there in regards to having that match change with Jim Cornette. Boy, that really did wonders for the Dynamic Dude's career. And then, of course, the old Johnny Sucks Shane's you know what. So thank you guys for kayfabe commentaries, that 1989 timeline as well. And of course, last and certainly not least, Steve, I thank you. But even more importantly, got to thank the listeners, all of the guys, from where it started to where we're at now, over 600 and some odd followers. You guys listen, you download, you subscribe. I got to say this. Last week blew my mind. I don't know if it was because it was the last episode, but it continues to grow every week. But last week we did as many downloads on Wednesday. I think I posted the show Tuesday night, like at 11. And Wednesday we did as many downloads in one day, or listens or subscription, whatever, in one day, last Wednesday, than we do basically in about a week. So it was the highest point thus far here for the Grenade, and things just continue to soar and grow. So I'm really happy to announce that. That was a huge deal. I loved looking at our numbers and seeing that we had done our whole week's numbers in one day. It was just phenomenal, Steve.
That's awesome. Yeah, definitely. Same to everybody. Thanks for everything. You guys are awesome. I mean, without the knowledge that's out there, it's out there. You just got to know where to find it and who to look for, and just to utilize it. You can go run around being blind to the reality of the situation if you want, but we're going to bring you the facts. And so thanks to all those guys. Thanks to the listeners. That's awesome. Matching our total in a week in one day. So hopefully the WWF in 1993, no, it's not the greatest year, but it's going to be a blast, and stick with this. We got some good stuff coming. So yeah, thanks to everybody.
And before we get to the awards, I just want to play a few of our favorite sound bites over the course of 1989, and it has to start with none other than Dan Spivey, who had just come into the NWA and joined the Varsity Club. I think the promo went something like this.
Hey, Blake's little howdy doody on your coconut. Ho, ho.
That's Dan Spivey threatening to beat someone up, I believe, as he plays a little howdy doody on your coconut. And he actually says that at least one other time in another promo. Unfortunately, shortly after that, nobody allows Dan Spivey to cut promos anymore. So it's sad we don't get a whole lot more Dan Spivey promos throughout the year, but that really lasted for me. It still makes me smile. So I love that one.
That's great. That's Norman with this throughout the duration,
yeah,
right?
That's a soundbite that's never going away, no matter what promotion, what year. I'm kind of sad Waylon Mercy's not around here in 1993. That's the only bummer in the WWF. But
we missed him in the Monday Warfare show too. So
you know who is in the WWF in 1993? Sadly, is a character by the name of Bastion Booger. And in 1989, he was simply Norman the Lunatic. And when he came in, he had those vignettes where he was kind of normal, and then he would go crazy, Steve, and he would have these shoe polish bags under his eyes. And he would do that turn, like his back would be to the screen, and he would turn back around, and all of a sudden he was crazy. He was a lunatic. And Superman, he had a telephone booth, right? And people don't even know what a telephone booth is, probably now in 2021, but I'm not getting into that. Google it. But Norman, all he had to do was make a simple noise. Yeah. And the rest is history. Norman the Lunatic. So we may save that for Bastion Booger. That's what I'll say every time it's a Bastion Booger match. Yeah. That's how I feel. No.
Friar Ferguson.
For 1 week. Yes. Another favorite soundbite of mine was the Iron Sheik. Of course, I don't have the Intelligent Jew American one, unfortunately, on me right now, but I do have this one.
And you pay attention. You are an idiot.
So the Iron Sheik pissed off and telling people to pay attention.
But you're an idiot. You better pay attention this time.
So Sheiky Baby just all over the place. God, he was so entertaining. He didn't get a lot of mic time, but man, was he entertaining to watch for all the wrong reasons in the ring. And then the promos we did get, they were fucking tremendous gems here in 1989.
Oh, yeah. Cameraman, zoom it.
Zoom
That's
it.
my favorite. He does it all
Just
the time.
hey, fuck you, Steve. Hey, fuck you, fuck jabroni. I love you, Shiki. Thank you for entertaining us for the time you were there. And of course, the funny story is, they forget he's on the payroll. And when the time comes in 1990, they're not using him. They forget he's on the payroll. And his contract rolls over for an entire year again, just to sit at home. And then Vince, because it's in the middle,
be the Iron Sheik.
yeah. And in the middle of the entire Gulf War, just happened to work out that we need more Middle Easterns, pal. So Vince comes calling, can't even barely walk, and the Iron Sheik gets another job, Colonel Mustafa, for another fucking however many months. So, boy, that guy had.
Then he gets another one with the Sultan, man.
Yes,
Jesus.
yes. 20 lives does the Iron Sheik have, Bubba.
And he gets WrestleMania 17 somehow.
Yeah, and he went. Well, the story there is, you've heard that, haven't you, Steve? He won because he couldn't get eliminated. Like he couldn't take the bump to the floor.
That's okay. I wish he would have got on the mic and told the cameraman to zoom it.
Yeah, he would have had to have gotten to the mic. Unfortunately, it just wasn't going to happen. There was a newcomer by the name of the Z-Man. At first, we didn't know who he was, supposedly, but they later revealed that he's Tom Zink because the jury was out once they realized he couldn't work or cut a promo or at least pronounce words, as the Z-Man continued to push his first ever pay-per-view.
Halloween Havoc, 89.
And that wasn't a one-time thing, Steve. He said it in about 17 promos.
Halloween Havoc,
I'm with you, man.
89.
I think they heard it the first time. It was like, does he really say it that way? Let's just have him keep on doing it. And
don't correct him.
I think it was a rib. I think it was a rib after the first one.
Hey, man, you cut that promo so well, we're going to have you say it on syndication, on the main events, on everything. Yeah, it was everywhere there for a couple weeks.
The pay-per-view with it.
I wish they had. That would have been tremendous. Welcome, guys, to
Halloween Havoc, 89.
Of course, another one of my favorite sound bites comes from probably the best promo of the entire year when Lex Luger turned heel and Sting come out to confront his former buddy. Luger, of course, kind of discussed Sting, and Sting takes off from the promo, and Luger goes on to cut a hell of a tirade, including talking about the fans wanting his autograph. His response?
Lex, can I have your autograph? No, you can't.
And not only is it hilarious, not only is the delivery hilarious, but you can tell by the way he says that he means it. Fuck you, fans. I don't want to sign your fucking autographs.
Well, I'm glad he changed his thought process on this. I got like 10 of them now, so I'm glad he didn't tell me no. But no, good stuff, man. That promo is probably one of the best ones. If you tell somebody NWA 89, give me the best promos, they're probably going to tell you Funk or Flair. But I'm educated now, so it's definitely that Lex Luger promo after he turned heel. Just excellent work.
Of course, Gordon Solie with the one of the most famous sound bites in wrestling history during the Funk and Flair I Quit match.
5 letters, 2 words. I
quit. Boy, was Gordon a shocker or what? How well he handled every position he got to put over these shows. He treated them like actual events, actual competitions. He gave it a real fight feel a lot of the times. The latter half of the year, once he was hired, he did a great job with the promo or the interviews at the Bash, at Halloween Havoc. But he stepped in here at this clash, New York Knockout clash with the Flair and the Funk match. And oh my God, he did a great job.
Yeah, he did. Going into it, I'm not a fan of Gordon Solie. You can only handle him in doses. He just has one of those voices that maybe wears on you if you hear it for like maybe a 4-hour show or a 3-hour show. But in spurts, like they used him, he was excellent. And some of those WNNs there towards the end, hyping up those matches. And I can't remember, it was Lex Luger and Pillman, how he did intertwine how Pillman was the hard worker, never got kicked off the team, overachieved and did everything, whereas Luger was the bad boy who got everything handed to him, got kicked off the team, he's undisciplined and that sort of stuff. He can make you look at these matches in a totally different light, and like you said, made them feel like sporting events. It wasn't just a match, it was Clash of the Titans. This is a tremendous athletic contest, and very few people can give that feel to matches. I mean, off the top of my head, it's probably him and Jim Ross. I can't think of anyone else that I'm sure these other guys are sports fans, but we know Jim Ross and Gordon Solie are sports fans. They know all about it. They talk about it all the time. they know their history of these guys. So those two are really it, and that can really, really enhance a show when done right. You can't do every match that way because not every match is an athletic contest like that. But when you got two young horses like Luger and Pillman, to sell it as a wrestling match or like a sporting event is an excellent idea, and he did a tremendous job.
Yeah, for sure. And we got 2 parts left of the show, everybody. I'm going to do something I like to call memorable matches. Just going to kind of run down some of the matches that really stuck out to me over the course of the year, and then we're going to get right into the awards, and that'll wrap things up. And basically, the memorable matches here, I got to point out as I started taking notes throughout the year, and not really rating the matches, but I wasn't giving them quarter stars and half stars and things, but kind of 3, 4, whatever. I noticed something, Steve. This subjectively, this year had probably more 4 to 5 star matches in total than pretty much, any company during this era, in the United States anyway. But then it just dips, there's not a whole lot of hot semi-main quality matches. It just goes straight from the greatest matches you've ever seen to, it was a match. It's just the way the year worked out. So there's a lot of, I remember that match. That was a pretty good match. And then there's just a handful of, wow, yeah, that was great. There's nothing really in between here, so it was very hard to do like a top 10 or anything like that. So I really just jotted down a bunch of the ones that I kind of have in my memory banks from the year for one reason or another. And I'm just going to run through some of those real quick. I want to talk about matches like Sting and Dr. Death teaming up against Terry Funk and Terry Gordy on one of the early episodes of the Power Hour. Not because the match was anything spectacular. It was more just, wow, look at these 4 names in the ring at the same time. Sting and Doc and Funk and Gordy there. I don't even know if you remember that one. I just remember it based on the randomness of the teams.
4 Hall of Famers now.
Yeah. Lex Luger and Dick Murdoch. We just talked about that from the first of the 2 matches from the November 10th Power Hour. That was a hell of a match. That was a really fun match. Again, just a 3-star match or whatever you want to call it, 3.5, whatever the hell, but not a top 10. But again, another memorable match. I really enjoyed it. And man, when Dick Murdoch wanted to work, even in 1989, he could go. And they didn't even do a whole lot, but they did enough. And man, were they over.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing is Murdoch works the best when he's over. And the stuff he was doing, it may not have started out that way, but by the end of the match, he was super over. And it was a very fun match. One of my favorites for sure.
We go back to the very first match taped at Center Stage, which was actually also the last match that was taped in the studio, but the match was reportedly so terrible that they made them tape it again at Center Stage, and that was Sting defeating Mike Rotunda for the TV title. The one that made air, it was a pretty solid match. I have it not marked it about 3 stars. Lex Luger and Sting, of course, we just saw that in the last episode of The Grenade from December 23rd, World Championship Wrestling. The finish was, a schmoz. But outside of that, man, they had a good little match on TV, I thought. It was nice to see such a high-profile match on TV. Maybe, off the top of my head, at least in the latter half of the year, probably the biggest named match on the TV.
No, yeah, it was a decent match. The finish just kind of ruined it for me. Very lackluster. I don't mind screwy finishes, but give me something more creative than that.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Honestly, that was my thought, too. I mean, I don't think either one of us were expecting a pinfall, or definitely not a submission, but I don't think we were expecting the pinfall, but just give me a really hot finish, and it was not a hot finish. But, hey, they're telling a story for the future, and the NWA continues on into 1990, whereas we're concluding here, so I guess fuck us, I suppose, at the end of the day. You remember, I know you remember this match. It really caught my eye because I really enjoyed it because it was very old school. It was 2 babyface buddies, maybe even best friends. Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert taking on Wildfire Tommy Rich. Of course, they had their runs together in Memphis and things of that nature. And here they are on the Power Hour having a match, and it was really Paulie Dangerously that sold this match. It was just tremendous the way he sold the match and their former backgrounds as heels, and they could turn at any point, but they never actually do. And Paulie really just told the story, backgrounds on their injuries, and he helped on commentary as much as the guys did in the ring, but I was, this is one of those matches, like I thought I really felt you out pretty good as to what you really, what interested you in a match. And I was like, oh, Steve's not going to like this match. But so I was really pleasantly surprised. We were like, yeah, this is a really good match. I was like, oh, wow, cool. Yeah, it was. So it was good to see, you picked up on the storytelling and you really listened to that. The commentary really helped it too.
Yeah, that's my big takeaway from that. And when you get two buddies in the ring together, you're just waiting for the one to throw the right hand and all hell break loose. That's just what you're accustomed to. That's what you're trained to look for. And Paul Lee, the whole time, I think it was like a 12 minute match. The whole time he's like, oh, here it is. He's getting upset. He's getting mad. He's about to swing on him and things like that. And just, it didn't happen. And so if the match is boring or if it's at a lull, but you have a guy on commentary doing stuff like that, it's like, okay, I don't want to pay attention anymore. I'm going to skim this. And then there goes Heyman. He's about to hit him. And you're like, oh, here we go. It's going to happen. Here it comes. And it never came. And that's what was awesome about it, because you're expecting it and then it didn't happen. And you got to finish. And it was a pretty good match. And I enjoyed it. And the commentary just really enhanced it. So yeah. I was pleasantly surprised myself.
And that was another early episode of the Power Hour. That's back in July 28th. So it was like the first month of the Power Hour there. They were putting that on there, and they did a great job. Another match that was really good was the Midnights and SST. Now, they wrestled each other a good 5-6 times, I think, over the course of the year. But it was their first match, even before the pay-per-view, that I thought was the best of all of them out of the whole year. That goes all the way back to the main event back on March 26th. That was the best of all of those matches between those two teams. All of them were solid. They were watchable. They were good TV wrestling. But that was the match that was a level above. That was like you had the good match on TV and then you did the rematch at the pay-per-view. And it just wasn't as good. It didn't click as well for me. We talk about Lex Luger and Brian Pillman. We already mentioned that, so I'll kind of just skim over it here. But they had two really solid matches, Luger and Pillman. I kept waiting for it to kick up into the next gear. It never really did. But the matches were still very good. And they were both at high-profile shows. Halloween Havoc, and then the rematch at the Clash in November. And then they have that third match, which didn't really count. It was more of an angle to set up the Luger and Sting feud. So we'll talk about just the two big ones, Pillman and Luger, just really good stuff.
Yeah, I agree.
Stinger and the Great Muta, they had a couple of good matches too. They go back to the Bash. That was their first match. That was the weird, odd finish where the announcers really didn't even seem to know what the hell was going on with the double pin, the back suplex. TV title gets vacated. And fast forward to September, and the September 1st weekend on TV, we see Sting and Muta go at it again. It's ironic that they actually, Muta actually wins the title from Sting, I think on September 3rd in the Omni. But they have a TV match the same weekend, leads to a disqualification. Sting mounts Muta in the corner. Gary Hart yanks Sting off. Sting goes tumbling over the top rope and disqualification. But they had it was a really good, solid TV match. And for as short as the Bash match was, it was just, I thought that was everything that epitomized both guys, really a lot of energy. And Muta was still pretty fresh, so he was doing all the Muta shit back then.
Yeah, he wasn't disinterested at that point. He was still invested in what he was doing. We know the wheels fall off after Starrcade, but yeah, a lot of these matches, man, they're like, how can they be bad when you look at the names on paper and just think of the year? These guys are young and in their prime and running around and flying for 20 minutes and putting on good matches after good matches. So, I mean, how can you go wrong with Sting and Muta, Luger and Pillman, Flair and everybody and a brother on here? He's fighting everybody. I think that's why one of the reasons why he's glad he got the book, because he was just in matches with people. I'm sure he was loving it. Yeah, you can't. This roster is loaded. So to have bad matches, it's not possible unless somebody has an off night, really.
I'm going to run down a trilogy of Ric Flair matches here. I'll let you touch on whichever ones you feel like, whatever. We can move on after I bring them up. But Flair and Sting, we just saw it at Starrcade. Both guys are baby faces. They're basically been best buddies since the Bash when Sting came out and helped Flair, and the rest is history. Flair's a baby face, and they go on, and basically Sting becomes a horseman by year's end. But they have that match at Starrcade. Sting gets the win. You wonder if the horsemen are going to turn. And they raise his hand, and Ric Flair says, to be the man, you got to beat the man. Well, Sting's the man, at least at Starrcade. That was a solid match. Nothing spectacular from the two, but just another typical Flair and Sting style of a match. Maybe even not as up-tempo as usual because they're both baby faces here. But Ric Flair and Eddie Gilbert, we have to go all the way back to February 5th in the main event when Gilbert, well, he just brought Steamboat in, so he'd already screwed himself, theoretically speaking, as far as being the top player. But this is where Eddie gets his nose broken by the Nature Boy. So a very memorable match there. Ric Flair and Dick Slater, that was one of my favorites because it was where Slater proved here in 89 he could go. And I didn't really pay a whole lot of attention to Slater's brief run here in 89 to tell you the truth up until we did this. And I was very impressed with everything he did. And, of course, this was over the course of 2 weeks. Slater came out to work a job guy at the end of the Pro. This goes back to October 7th. He's scheduled to work a job guy, beats the shit out of the job guy. Bell never sounds, throws him out of the ring, calls Ric Flair to get his ass out there. Flair comes out. They start having this hot, fiery match, and to be continued next week on Pro. So you know I'm watching next week. Thank God we have both of those episodes. And it picks up, and we get that Slater and Flair match really hot. Unfortunately, it ends on a count out. I think Slater walks off or something like that. But wrestling-wise, man, it was a hell of a great match for TV. I loved it. And then, so that's another trifecta of Flair matches there.
Yeah, my favorite one is, I'm with you, the Dick Slater one. It started out like these guys are mad at each other, and it's a fight. They're punching and chopping and kicking and brutalizing the hell out of each other. There's a lot of fighting on the outside. I mean, they're really going at it. It's not chin locks and, leg locks and stupid stuff that you wouldn't see in a fight when you're mad at somebody. So that's one thing I will say one more time here is the NWA knew, the talent knew, or were allowed to, I should say, to fight when a fight was warranted. Whereas the WWF, they don't necessarily do that. So it's great to see it. I know we pointed it out every single time we saw it that way. And that was really one of the prime examples of that. And then the Funk match, I think when did they have they didn't have a singles match out. Well, yeah, they did the Bash, right? The Bash. So that was a fight. That wasn't even a match. That was a fight.
Yeah, it was wild.
Great. It was excellent. Yeah, it was excellent. So knowing what you need to do when you get into the ring is important, obviously. And these guys know it.
We got to bring up the Thunderdome and Halloween Havoc. Bruno Sammartino's the referee. It's Flair and Sting against Muda and Funk. They got their Terminators in each corner. The guy's got to throw the towel in. Or Ole Anderson returns for Flair's team, and Gary Hart's got the towel for Funk's team. And the top of the cage is supposed to be electrified, supposedly, and they had it rigged to do some kind of wonky shit. But unfortunately, some of the gadgets catch on fire, and the fire marshal orders all of the gimmicks to be shut down. All the electricity has to be shut down that's connected to the cage. So the wrestlers start going up there to do things, and nothing's happening. And poor Terry Funk just hangs up there for half the match, it feels like. I don't know what he was waiting for. I mean, it was a good match still. It was fun. Obviously not a top 5 match or anything like that, but they had fun in there. They had a good fight, and Sting swung from a vine. So you got that. And then, we get the finish where Gary Hart gets the towel knocked out of his hand, and Bruno sees it, and Flair and Sting go over. It was a fun match, though.
Yeah, it was entertaining. Just not. I think it would have been better if the pyro worked, to be honest.
Well, it worked. It just caught shit on fire, and that was the end of the special effects for the evening, unfortunately. I agree with you, though.
Yeah, if we was able to see it, I think, obviously we're not going to see anybody get electrocuted or anything, but just the effects, that's what you pay to see. That's what you thought you was going to get, and then you can't get it. So it's like AEW.
Good call. Another good match early on in the year. We got to go again all the way back to January 14th. One of the very early episodes of the Grenade. Barry Windham is U.S. champion taking on Eddie Gilbert. This was before Steamboat came in. This is actually what led to Steamboat coming in, which leads to the next match, Flair and Windham taking on Eddie Gilbert and Mystery Man, who turns out to be Ricky Steamboat, making his return a week later, January 21st. I don't really remember the match being all that spectacular. It was really just a build to Steamboat's return and to get that pin on Flair on the hot tag. But in general, man, it was a huge night for the company.
Yeah, it was. Good stuff. Nice little feud there, just leading to TV matches. Not bad stuff.
Lex and Tommy Rich, we've kind of touched on that already from Clash of the Champions in September. Flair and Luger from Starrcade. I don't know if you remember it, if it sticks out to you or anything like that. Obviously, it wasn't Flair and Luger from Starrcade 88. The world title wasn't on the line, although if you listen to the promos leading into the pay-per-view, titles don't matter. But Luger thinks they do because he wants the world title, but it was a solid match I thought they had at Starrcade.
Yeah, that's probably my favorite match of the night. I liked it better than Flair and Sting.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. I'd definitely agree with that as well. And I think that goes back to the face versus face dynamic too, to a degree.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
I talked about that Windham and Luger match way back at Chi-Town Rumble where Luger wins the U.S. title back on February 20th. Now that easily, I would have guessed, would have been a top 5 match. Which is a bold statement given what's in the top 5. But these guys are really doing a hell of a job, and then they just kind of took it home really abruptly there. Like I said, I think it was 10 and a half minutes or so into the match. Man, if that had went 20, even, 25 minutes, people would still be talking about it today. Instead, it's an afterthought. You don't really hear it ever mentioned, but God, what could have been?
Yeah. If we didn't get that shitty Butch Reed match with Sting or Jack Victory.
Yeah, 17
whatever.
Jack Victory matches. Poor Jack, though.
Yeah.
Jack of all trades.
You skipped Ric Flair and Mike Rotunda from the main event.
Oh, I guess I did. Yeah, I don't see it on here. I suppose you're right.
I like that match. I did like that match.
And I think that was the highest rated main event of the year, I believe. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I won't argue that.
It was so good they re-aired it like 3 times, thinking it was going to do the same thing after it did it the first time.
Right. But people had already seen it by then, so that's why it did the best ratings. Exactly. Everybody saw it the first time. But that definitely belongs in there with all the other 3-star, a little above that matches. A solid wrestling match for sure. Probably Mike Rotunda. Well, I can't say one of his best match because he had a decent one with Rick Steiner. He had a decent one with Doc at Clash. He had a decent one with Sting. So Rotunda's matches, good matches, are few and far between. But yeah, he did have a few good ones with the right talent.
Yep. When he's invested, he's good.
Top 5, I know this is all subjective. I had a hard time naming 5 because there was a lot of matches I'd argue could have filled into the 5th spot. So any of these matches here, you guys could make your own choice, or any of the matches I already mentioned, for that matter, make your own top 5. But these are some of the matches I looked forward to filling in that number 5 spot in the top 5. War Games really stuck out to me. Again, no blood. But, man, those guys just busted their ass to put on a hell of an entertaining match at the Great American Bash. Flair and Sting versus Muta and Dick Slater at Clash of the Champions in September. That was supposed to be Muta and Funk, and then Funk got the staph infection and couldn't work the show. Well, he came out and he murdered Ric Flair there for a brief period anyway, suffocated him because Brian Pillman gave him CPR during the commercial, according to Jim Ross, which would make you believe that Ric Flair had died. But, yeah, so Flair and Sting and Muta and Slater, I never really got into that match. Not because as I was watching, but because, this is kind of secondary. There's no Terry Funk. This is the first time I ever really, really watched it. And, man, I like I said, it's in my list of potential top 5s. Again, the finish with the suffocation thing, not the reason it's a top 5, but everything leading into that, it was a really great tag team match, I thought.
Yeah, it definitely was. This is when I was really, eyes were open to how good Dick Slater was. If all you know Dick Slater from is the Stud Stable and Bunkhouse Buck and Arn Anderson, then I would recommend going back and watching his 2-week run here in 1989. I'm sure there's other stuff of him available with feuds that are hot and things like that. But if you just want to see a guy come in and replace Terry Funk to the best of his ability and actually do it justice, that's what Dick Slater was in 1989. He was the best. He was a really good closer,
Yeah.
Came out of the bullpen and did work.
And then he goes off to do a tour of Japan in I think it was October. And they're like, well, screw you. We just gave you a job. They replace him with Kendo Nagasaki, of all fucking people. I would have rather waited for Dick Slater to return, to be honest with you. But it is what it is. Go on. I'm going to talk Ricky Steamboat and Terry Funk from one of your favorite clashes, Clash 7, way back in the middle of the summer, June 14th. The only reason I couldn't really put it anywhere higher or kind of debatable is the finish. There was no pinfall here, obviously. So, but these guys, for the way as hot as that building was, we saw half the crowd had left. We saw the rest of the crowd had their shirts off. We saw wrestlers sweating 1 minute into their matches. They were huffing and puffing 3 minutes into their matches. Even well-conditioned guys seemed to be blown up early on. But these two guys, man, they'd fucking been here. They've done that. And they had a hell of a fun match.
Yeah, I mean, they're the only ones that went past 7-8 minutes. I think they went, 15, almost 20?
Yeah.
In that heat. And it was a fun match. And then you got the Luger angle right afterwards. So I'm with you just because of the non-finish and things like that. You can't put it in the top 5, but it definitely needs to be talked about as one of the best matches of the year.
And, part of that, another fun part of that, and we'll get to, I guess, well, I don't want to spoil it yet. We'll talk about a promo that led into that match, though, before this episode's over, hopefully. I really enjoyed. But another couple of matches here I got for potential number 5 spots. Lex Luger and Ricky Steamboat from the Great American Bash. Again, though, the finish is what hurts that, the DQ. They built it all the way into the pay-per-view that it was going to be a no DQ match, and then Luger kept saying, I'm not going to have a no DQ match. And then they come out and they announce the match as a no DQ match, even though Luger never once said he was going to have a no DQ match. Made it even more confusing. Finally, Lex says, I'll only wrestle if it's not a no DQ match. So they said, all right. And then eventually Steamboat gets himself DQ'd because he loses his cool, which is a great storyline for the heel Luger to get the one up on Steamboat because, Steamer got disqualified. He pissed off the babyface. Finally got fire out of Steamboat, fire out of the dragon, pun intended. It only took 7 months, and then Steamboat was gone, though. So it was unfortunate, never really got a payoff. I can only imagine what the no DQ match that was planned to follow this, how good that could have been.
That would have been insane, especially at this point because, like I said, Luger was selling like it was money. Him in a no DQ getting bashed with the chair over and over or whatever the case may be, whatever Steamboat came up with, that would have been really good. I'm with you there. Damn you, Bonnie.
Yeah. And then another match I'm sure a lot of people would lump into the top 5 is one of the trilogy. Can't believe I'm saying this. I don't specifically put it in the top 5. Maybe I should because there was a finish here. It was the third of the 3 matches between Steamboat and Flair where Flair wins back the world title from Steamboat, and then Steamboat becomes an afterthought 10 seconds later when Terry Funk does the turn on Flair. We go back to May 7th in the Wrestle War pay-per-view, Steamboat and Flair. That's probably number 5. I'm sure most people would lump it in there simply because there was a finish, a title change, the aftermath with Funk, even though that shouldn't really count towards the match. But there's that too. So I don't know where you put this match and their match of the 3 in the trilogy, but for me, this is the third of the 3. This was the least favorite of mine, I guess I'd say, of the 3.
I'm with you there.
I felt like the ending was abrupt.
I'll put it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just kind of came out of nowhere.
And now we're going to go into my personal top 4 matches, guys. So this is subjective, so don't go get all pissy and things, but I don't think you're going to argue. Maybe the placement. I'm sure a lot of you will argue the placement, but I don't think you're going to argue the matches. And in at number 4, I have Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair, Chi-Town Rumble. That was their first match. February 20th, that's where Steamboat wins the World Heavyweight Championship. So Steamboat and Flair, the first match of the trilogy from Chi-Town Rumble. It at number 4 for me. It at number 3 is the Flair and the Funk Brawl from Great American, the Wild Brawl, the fight that they had back at the Great American Bash. And you could really flip-flop those two, depends on what you're more into, the fighting, the heat, the passion, the war between Funk and Flair finally getting their hands on one another since Funk took him out. Or you can, if you're just into the story of Steamboat returns to the company and wins the world title, that's why I have that at 4, Funk and Flair at 3. I have Funk and Flair again at 2. This was tough for me. From Clash of the Champions, and at number 2, the New York Knockout, the I Quit match, Terry Funk's supposed retirement match. Flair beats the Funker. Funker goes babyface after the match when J-Tex basically, I don't know that they turn on him, but he's done. And that was a hell of a fucking match. And then number 1 for me, if you guys haven't figured out by now, wrestling-wise, this just goes straight back to wrestling, was the second match in the trilogy of the Flair and Steamboat feud, Clash of the Champions 6, World Heavyweight title match, best 2 out of 3 falls. That match in New Orleans, Steve, is the number 1 match for me. Steamboat and Flair, the 60-minute match.
I like it. I think the only thing I'm more inclined to put Flair and Steamboat probably 1 and 2, to be honest with you.
Okay.
And then the Funk Flair matches, I like that. I actually like the Great American Bash match. So my number 1 would be Flair and Steamboat at Clash. Number 2, the Chi-Town Rumble, the Bash, and then Clash 9 would be number 4. And I agree with your 5. Take your pick. It's whatever you're feeling that day. It can fit number 5. But these 4 matches, if somebody asks you what does NWA 1989 stand for, it's these 4 matches. This is it. It encompasses the whole year. You get the beginning, you get the end. You actually get the first 6 months. But well, you got November too. So yeah, I mean, this is what NWA 1989 is all about. These 2 feuds, and
there's a common denominator in all of these top matches too, Steve. There's one man in every single one of these matches.
I was just going to get to that, and
yeah,
I know Ric Flair is in all of them, but I don't necessarily think that it's Ric Flair for why these matches are as good as they are.
No, certainly not on its own, but takes 2 to
be
tango.
honest with you, I feel like these feuds are memorable because of his adversaries and not necessarily him. I know he came out on top at the end of all the matches and the whole stories, but I feel like we've talked about it all year. Like this whole grenade is, what the hell would a Ric Flair done if these guys didn't come in?
Yeah.
And to me, that really tells you how good these guys were off the street. I don't think people realize this. These dudes came in off the street, essentially. Obviously, they're pros and they've been around the block millions of times, but...
Well, remember, Steamboat been out since WrestleMania 4, and Funk's been in Hollywood. So you're right, they did come in off the street. They hadn't even, neither one of them had been in the ring in quite some time.
Yeah, and look what they did. They wrote magic. They made magic all year long, and that's kudos to them. I'm not knocking Ric Flair. He's just as responsible as the other two guys, but I feel like if you had these same sort of angles, let's say Ric Flair and Sting, I don't know if it's as memorable because
Right.
Sting's not going to be able to deliver the promos. The matches, we've seen them a million times on the Monday show already because of Nitro. They're all the same to a degree. They just maybe change one or two things. Whereas Steamboat and Flair are so dynamic, or Steamboat and Funk are so dynamic as performers that you can have them fight 3 or 4 times and they're going to be different every single time because that's how good they are. I mean, we talk about Ricky Steamboat and Ric Flair. Hell, their Spring Stampede 94 match
Right.
is off the charts, and it's different than anything you see from 1989.
And there's a handheld match here from 89 between the two as well earlier on in the year. I can't remember what city it's from, but I've seen a lot of people classify that as better than some of the other matches in the trilogy. I just...
Is it Jersey?
I'm not sure. I can't remember where it was. I feel like it was up north, though. But I just remember I've seen more than one person state that match was probably better than some of the other matches in the trilogy, but for at least this particular year, the NWA in 89, I tried to stay away from the handheld stuff, but we're going to kind of look into that moving forward, at least into the WWF now. But yeah, in this instance, I just tried to avoid the handheld stuff, but I have heard that match was right up there. That might even be in the top 5 if you want to count handheld footage.
Yeah, so like you said, you can't go wrong with any of these matches, but I prefer Steamboat Flair.
And for me, match of the year goes to Steamboat and Flair, Clash of the Champions 6, the 60-minute 2 out of 3 fall match. Obviously, you can take your own pick as well here because it's really is subjective.
Hell, to be honest, man, you could do a top 5 with Fall 1, Fall 2, and Fall 3, like we talked about. Yeah. I don't want to give away the watch along, but if you haven't heard it, but it's 3 separate matches rolled into one. That's how good they were. So, I mean, you essentially got 6 matches or 5 matches out of Steamboat and Flair 1989 if you break that up into individual matches. That's how good it was.
Yeah, so we've moved over into the awards ceremony. You've heard of the Slammies. This is the Kablammies. So we're just going to have a little fun with these, Steve. But match of the year starts off those awards. And for me, like I said, I got to give it to that show in New Orleans, Clash of the Champions 6. What say you?
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree with you. That's I know others disagree. I think it's normally you see the Chi-Town match because of the crowd, but I'm with you on Clash 6. Tremendous match. It's unfortunate that they got such a shit rating. Isn't it like the lowest Clash or one of them?
I think it was one of the lower ones. Yeah, I know the shitty like 5 got more than 6. Yeah, there was only 6 at the time. I don't remember. Now going forward, I'm not sure. Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah, I think it is. So it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Screw you, George Scott.
We move on with the awards, though. Wrestler of the Year. I had to go with only one man here, but I wrote a few names down. Terry Funk, man, he came in May and he really made a go of it with Sting and a lot of the other guys while Flair was out, and then of course Flair, and just kept going on. It was a hell of a run for Terry Funk. Lex Luger obviously had a hell of a run too this year. Ricky Steamboat for the 7 months he was there certainly has to be looked at as one of the tops. Had great matches with Ric Flair. We were just talking about those. And then the match with Funk at the Clash as well. And then Luger. Steamboat definitely, arguably, should be in the running as well. But I had to go, for me, Wrestler of the Year, Ric Flair. He's in all of the top matches, whether it was him alone or not. It's really not the question. It's the fact that he's in every single one of these matches. So whoever's in the most top-notch matches wins for me anyway. I had to go Wrestler of the Year, Ric Flair.
I agree with you there.
MVP of the year, I put down Terry Funk and Lex Luger, and I put down Terry Funk because I felt like he saved the company while Flair was out those 2.5, 3 months, whatever it was, with all those great promos there for a while before the wheels came off. And then all that stuff with Sting, all those great brawls and stuff on TV, and the painting the yellow down the job guy's back and all this other shit, killing all the jobbers with the pile drivers. I thought he did a hell of a job leading into the Flair feud. And then, of course, the Flair feud really took off till the end. Unfortunately, there was that thing called Funk's Grill that hurt him a little bit there. But I think, MVP at the end of the year, it's not the wrestler of the year, but it's the guy who did the most besides just wrestling. And I had to give that to Lex Luger because no matter what he was doing, he made the best of it.
And he was there all year, whether he was doing shit or not, like, wrestling with Tommy Rich and that sort of stuff. He was there all year long. Yeah. He evolved. He got better. He never rested on his laurels like everybody says he does. He really, really improved and got to a point where I know you did the angle where he can't get a title match anymore, but by the end of the year, like, they're like, shit, we got to get this guy up there. And I know Jim Hurd was a big fan of him. I'm with you there, man. He's my MVP as well.
Most popular / most over award has got to go to Sting. I pointed that out. Not the best wrestler, definitely not even close to the best promo. Maybe one of the worst promos at times, but he was just over. No matter what if they were doing nothing with him for 6 months on end, he was just over, inexplicably over. The charisma or whatever the hell with the it factor, I suppose. So I gave Sting most popular award with the fans.
Really, the only other guy you can really throw in there is maybe Rick Steiner, to be honest.
Right. I can see that, yeah.
But I'm with you on Sting.
Feud of the year, there was a few of them here. I put Steiner's versus Sullivan just because it went on so long, not because it was the feud of the year, but I had to feel like it needed at least to be a runner-up in notations anyway. Flair and Steamboat you could put here. Flair and the J-Tex organization. I kind of left this open-ended, Steve, let you make your choice what you thought the feud of the year was.
I'm gonna go. It's Norman and Teddy Long. No, okay. No, I'm joking. The feud of the year is definitely Ric Flair and J-Tex. They had the most heat, the best angles as far as significance and severity. You got the pile driver on the table, the suffocation angle. There's so many memorable moments that continue this feud all the way through the Clash, the New York Knockouts. So Flair and Steamboat, it didn't seem like a feud to me. It felt like a sporting contest. Like, who's the better man? Yep. Who's going to get the upper hand? Who's going to make the one mistake that causes you to lose everything? That sort of deal. Whereas Flair and J-Tex was just like a blood feud. And that, to me, sells tickets better. And so I'm going to go with Flair and J-Tex.
Yeah,
the
doing the same thing there. Feud of the year, Ric Flair and the J-Tex Corporation, or Flair and Funk. If you want to be exact for most of the time. Anyway, worst wrestler. This is going to be a fun one. So many guys who come down the pike throughout 1989. There was Wild Bill Irwin, the Z-Man, Scott Hall, Junkyard Dog, the Iron Sheik, Tommy Rich, Michael Hayes. I'm looking at this list here and I'm wondering who is the worst wrestler of the year, aka the Flusher Award. I think based on longevity, Steve, it has to immediately come down to Michael Hayes or Tommy Rich. Who are you picking?
Man, that's tough to run a tie. Tommy Rich did get better at the end of the year, where he stopped doing the rest holds consistently and started working a more modern style for him. So because of that, and the fact that I couldn't even stand this dude to even be on my screen as much as he was, I'm going with Michael Hayes.
Yeah, I too am going to go Michael Hayes for a few reasons. Obviously, Tommy did seem to get a little better there at the tail end of the year, but he had a good match with Luger. He had that fun match with Eddie Gilbert on TV. I can't say that about Mike. I think the only compliment I paid Michael Hayes all year long in a wrestling match was when the Birds wrestled the Midnights. I said, "Oh, that wasn't a terrible match," and that was all Midnight Express. So I think the only time Hayes was even worthy of appearing on my screen was that brief bit when he was teaming with Terry Gordy. So I'm going to agree with you, man. Wrestling-wise, worst wrestler of the year, easily Michael Hayes.
I want to flush it again.
Double Flesher Award for Mr. Purely Sexy, Michael PMS Hayes. As we move on, we can talk Tag Team of the Year. God, so many teams came down the pike this year. So many teams, even on the undercard. I got to shout out to a ton of them. The State Patrol, Cruel Connection, the Texas Broncos, the Commandos, the New Zealand Militia, the New Fantastics, the Fulton Brothers, the original Fantastics, for that matter, were here. Remember that? God, man, that was a long time ago. The Russian Assassins, Eddie Gilbert and Tommy Rich, all variations of the Varsity Club, Doc and Spivey, Sullivan and Doc and Rotunda, Arn and Ole at the end, Zink and Pillman, Gilbert and Rick Steiner as the last U.S. Tag Team Champions of '89. The Dynamic Dudes, they were a team. I didn't say they belong on this list, but they were a team. The Birds, Gordy and Hayes, eventually Hayes and Garvin. The original Midnights, the real Midnights, the SST, who became the Wild Samoans, Doom, the Freebirds of Garvin and Hayes, Skyscrapers, Road Warriors. I gave mine to the Steiners, and even though they've only been teaming the final 6-7 months of the year, man, did they really take off. Not just because they won the World Tag Titles, just the matches they put on, the quality that they gave us every week in the ring.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to go with the Steiners. They were so impactful once they got together. Just even their squash matches were fun. When they killed that big fluffy guy, Jesus.
Danny Marlowe.
Yeah, so like you always look forward to a Steiner Brothers match, and that's really all you like. That's a good way to describe like how good they were. When you look forward to a squash match of a team, you know they're doing something right. And the Steiners were by far the best team, the most entertaining team, and the most different team. Because you look at a lot of these guys, I mean, Doom was lost, and they're still lost. We're done with 89, and they're still lost. They don't really know what to do in the ring together yet. They haven't really developed their style. They're still modifying things. The Midnights are the Midnights. Freebirds suck. Samoans are awesome, but they really toned it down a lot.
Right.
I don't know when. I don't know when that occurred. Maybe when Heyman left. Skyscrapers and the Roadies are pretty much the same. So the Steiners were different, man. All the suplexes and the Frankensteiner and the Steiner lines that were stiff as hell and tossing dudes around. You just didn't see that from anyone else on the roster, and that's how good they were. Good choice. I'm with you on that one. Definitely.
And the Roadies were in and out also. They would disappear for a month or two at a time. I don't know if they were in All Japan or what they were doing. And the Steiners were there from the time. Rick Steiner was there all year. And by the time, him and Scott formed, they were there the remainder of the time. Roadies don't ever want to do a job. The Steiners are doing jobs to the fucking Freebirds just to get the angle over. So, I mean, I got to give them credit there as well. So definitely Tag Team of the Year for me is the Steiner Brothers. They really took off here immediately. Once they got together in 89. Now, I gave an MVP award. I gave a Wrestler of the Year to Flair and MVP to Lex Luger in the singles. In the tag team, I gave Tag Team of the Year to the Steiners. This is a little less obvious. MVP Tag Team of the Year. I gave this to the Midnight Express. Luger's was obvious. He stood out. He did a lot of great things all year. The Midnights were in lulls where they had nothing for them. But I calculated how many good matches they had. And I think the Midnight Express had more good tag team matches than any other team on the entire company throughout the course of the year. And that included matches with the Freebirds. When I say good, I'm not saying they were fucking, 4 stars, but they were like, oh, okay, I could watch that match and not cringe, which is saying something with Michael Hayes in the ring. So I gave the MVP Tag Team Award to the Midnights simply for having a shit ton of 3-star matches on TV.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like we say, the Luger Tommy Rich match isn't bad. It's not great by any means. But like you said, when you see these guys as much as we do in a recording session, I mean, we're watching 6 to 8 episodes of TV in like 2 days. So it's like constant, the same guys over and over. And you cringe when some of these guys show up. The Freebirds are one of those guys, but when you see them in the ring with the Midnights and they actually put on a decent match, it's like, okay, that wasn't bad. Thank you for being in the ring, the Midnights, because, it wasn't bad. So I'm with you, man. The Midnights, no matter who they were in the ring with, they had a good match, and that goes to show like their professionalism too, because they knew nobody wanted them there, but they still went out there and busted their ass and put on good matches for everybody. Bobby Eaton's probably still taking backdrops on the concrete.
Ugh, poor Bobby. So we go from the best tag teams to the worst tag team. in the NWA. You can look at teams like the New Zealand Militia, which have actually improved lately thanks to Lord Littlebrook. Rip Morgan's really improved, and Jack Victory's kind of slimmed down. They've gotten a little better. Just subsequently, they do that when Littlebrook comes in, so that gets a little bit of a pass for me anyway. Then we can go back to Jack Victory's other character on the way into 1989, the Russian Assassins. Kick and punch, a lot of chin locks, nothing to see there, but I don't know that they earned the title Worst Tag Team. I don't even know that Garvin and Hayes necessarily earned the name of Worst Tag Team of the Year. For me, my Worst Tag Team of the Year has got to be the Dynamic Dudes. I have never seen a team pushed so much, so hard, for so long, and just never got with it. They never understood the gimmick. They never got it over. They never fucking figured it out in the ring. I mean, Shane Douglas is fucking doing crossbodies to his own partner's face. Johnny Ace looks like absolute ass. They never really seemed to get that tag team shit down. They didn't get the gimmick down. It was a mess from the beginning, and it never got better.
Definitely did not. I agree with you here as well. You know, I like Shane Douglas, but this just didn't work. They never bought into it, and when you don't buy into something, you said it 100 times, it's not going to work ever, no matter how good you are. If you're not buying it, it's not going to work. I can't believe how much effort and time they put into those guys. But to be honest with you, they would have been dead and forgotten about if it wasn't for Cornette coming up with the idea to put the four of them together. That way they could actually have work and something, you know, to
do
work with. Yeah, something to do.
Yeah.
So they would have probably been long gone if it wasn't for Cornette.
Yeah, Dynamic Dudes, you take that award, you fucking deserve it. Let me tell you.
We should name that award after the Dynamic Dudes, because that's how you don't become a tag team.
You got
this
that
is everything
right.
you don't do.
Don't do.
This
yeah.
is everything you don't do to be a tag team in wrestling.
For 12 months, we crowned a
VIP Jobber of the Month.
And I would venture to say nearly half of those months, 5-6 times at least, that award went to one man. But before we get to that man, I want to honorably mention some of the other guys that have won the award or otherwise. Guys like Jack Victory, who's put on more hoods than I can count here in 1989 to do the job for as he was needed on pay-per-views and clashes and things of that nature. Of course, our good buddy Chopper, Steve Casey, who recently passed away in the early December. He came in started to get a push briefly under George Scott, and then they realized he wasn't ready and kind of fell into the job guy role there and stuck with the company for about 8 months, I think. Bob Emery, who was there pretty much all year, he was a long-time mainstay doing jobs there in the Crockett area. Brad Anderson, the son of Gene Anderson, who worked mostly as Agent Steel here in 1989. George South under the Cruel Connection mask. Mike Justice, another guy who's been here most of the year. Bob Cook, one of the perennial job guys of all time, one of the best. Pat Rose, ditto. Pat Rose wasn't here a whole lot, but he sticks out because he's been in the business forever at this point and got little pushes here and there, depending on the territory as well. Cougar J, there's a name we haven't said in a long time. Cougar J, a former one, I can't remember if it was February or March VIP Job of the Month. I think it was March or April maybe. Went to Cougar J, but here's another one. And you remember from out of town, Snake Brown, another honorable mention. Not because he was good in the ring, but just the look and the ring introduction from out of town. Yes, the look, absolutely the hair of Snake Brown. But
you forgot Trent Knight there.
I skipped out. How do I do that too? Yeah, Trent Knight, another former VIP Jobber of the Month. Trent Knight, one of the best. He took the fireball from Eddie Gilbert and then fucking his face wasn't even burned a week later. That was awesome. Superman, Trent Knight. But yeah, he was great all year. He was the guy that like flew up when the Midnights launched him up and he landed on Doc's hands, and he was just a really solid and had a decent look about him. Just never made it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree with you there. He has a really good look, and he kind of reminds me of Scott Hall a little bit before, just blonde hair instead of the dark brown hair or black hair, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, just never really developed probably a big enough size for that era.
And then the winner, of course, has to be the man who's held the VIP Jobber of the Month award more than any other man on earth, or all of the other ones combined, likely. And that guy, it has to go to wrestler, soon to be turned full-time referee, Lee Scott. I don't know. I'm sure it had to be somewhat injury related. Man, what a fucking enjoyment Lee Scott was. Every time he was in the ring, You knew it was like, oh, this is going to be a fun match. He's not going to let us down. What a great year, or 9 months, however long Lee Scott was in the ring here in 89. What a great time it was to follow Lee Scott, and I still stick by this. Had they done the Mikey Whipwreck with this guy here, by the end of 89, he would have been gold.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Jim Ross was pumping him up. Like, everybody gave him offense. Like, towards the end there, like, Luger was even giving him offense a little bit and things like that. So he's definitely earned the respect of the boys. The crowd knew when Lee Scott was in the ring because they were just waiting for the ooh and ah moment. Yeah, I'm with you, man. That Mikey Whipwreck gimmick would have been perfect for Lee Scott. Absolutely.
NWA Rookie of the Year. Now, this is the NWA Rookie of the Year, guys. Obviously, these guys aren't rookies. They're not being coming off the street and diving straight into the NWA. Well, unless you're Dusty's kid. Dustin did get tossed right in there briefly there at the end of 88, beginning of 89. But in general, this award actually goes to the guys who made their debut in the NWA in 1989. Guys like Brian Pillman, Scott Steiner, Sid Vicious. Look at that list of guys that came to the NWA in 1989. Pillman, Scott Steiner, Sid Vicious. But I think the guy who made the most impact and the biggest impression on me, certainly in the early months especially, but worked in the main event and did quite a bit for me, I give the NWA Rookie of the Year for 89 to the Great Muta.
I'm with you. Can't really argue.
Announcer of the Year, I think, unfortunately, and I don't mean that in a bad way, just it seems like it has to go to Jim Ross. He was on everything. All the pay-per-views, all the clashes. At one point, he was on 4 out of 5 of the TV programs. But I'm not trying to knock JR. He does a good job. He was just overused, oversaturated with Jim Rossosities at one point in the year, but he did a good job.
Yeah, the problem is like when like you mentioned, when you get into, you hear him talk about Brian Pillman 4 times in one weekend, you're going to hear about the University of Ohio or Miami
of Ohio, boys. Miami of Ohio.
Yeah.
And Ed Block Courage Award, Cincinnati Bengals. Nose tackle.
Yeah.
My God.
He was on the suicide team. So like you hear that 4 times in a weekend, it's like the rest, but you can't do that because you're filming and recording and getting these shows out as if this may be the only show people watch or have access to. So I get it. It's just annoying.
Shit, 4 times in a week, Steve. Listen to it every week for fucking 4 years. 89, 90, 91, 92. I heard that shit forever. I didn't even know what an Ed Block Courage Award was until JR, but I sure as hell will never forget it now.
So I'm with you, though. It's definitely him. They thank God for Bob Caudle and Lance Russell. They really kind of saved the show a little bit once they came in because they really had nothing. They had nothing at commentary. Yeah,
I mean, I love the fact that they basically acquired every single open announcer there in the second half of the year. Lance Russell came in. Whoa, what a breath of fresh air that was. Gordon Soley, and they even had Joe Pedicino in there doing those syndicated promo things, whatever the fuck that deal was there. The Fans Man, the Round Mound of Sound. I'll put his name out there now because I don't know if I'm going to mention it again before this episode's over. The I Forgot He Was Here Award. Honorable mentions go to guys like Bob Orton Jr., who refused to do a job. I can't remember who it was to. And they told him to take a walk. Man, I wish I could remember who it was to now.
Was it Sting?
I don't feel like it was that high up. It was during that tag title tournament. That's right. He didn't want to do the job to somebody in that tag title tournament, so they had him like fight his way out, and then Butchery was teaming with him, so Butchery had to go get a new partner, and it was like a job guy. So maybe you're right. Maybe it was Murdoch or whoever else was in that. It was a tag title tournament. No, Murdoch came out and fought him, brawled with him out of the building, and they told him, okay, you can go home. So yeah, Bob Orton keeping it real. Al Perez, another guy that was trying to keep it real. He found out. He didn't want to do the job to fucking world champion Ric Flair or whatever the story goes. So Al Perez takes off to Florida to work for Dusty. And then Dusty takes off from Florida to go work for Vince. So fuck you, Al Perez. And Larry Zbyszko was there for a period. And of course he jumps over to the AWA and gets the world title. And Vern Gagne, his father-in-law's money. Abdullah the Butcher in and out. Bam Bam Bigelow was there early in the year briefly with Humperdinck before Humperdinck came back later with the Samoans. Dusty Rhodes was there for a couple weeks, as was Tony Schiavone for a month or two before he made his jump to the WWF. For me, though, I forgot he was a Hero Award. I didn't actually forget he was here, but it feels like so long ago. It feels like it was a different world that Barry Windham was here in the NWA in 1989.
Yeah, and he was getting that big push, too. And then Dusty left. And his promos were getting better. I remember talking about that early on. during the Grenade House promos.
He was getting that Titan look. He was getting tan, and he was probably on something at that point too. So he was getting ready for a major push with a good look, and boom, it just he didn't trust those involved in higher ups.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Best all-around promo, as in who cut the most good promos over the course of the year. I wrote the usual suspects are obviously Ric Flair, who was pretty flawless throughout the year. Jim Cornette, when he had something to talk about, was damn good. I'm not counting as hosting the Power Hour because those aren't really promos or commentary. I'm just talking about interviews. I gave it to Terry Funk, even though I know it was hit or miss, and I'm not counting the Funk's grills. I gave it to Terry Funk because he had the most memorable promos I can count on my fingers, especially early on. It was like 8 weeks in a row of just knocking shit out of the park with great promos and things. And then the back and forths he had with Steamboat and Sting and Ric Flair. So for me, best promo overall for the entire year, I gave it to Terry Funk for most entertaining. I mean, obviously I'm sure Ric Flair probably cut better promos consistently, but I just thought Terry Funk's were different, unique, and more fun. So for me, best promo for the year is Terry Funk.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, Ric Flair's were okay, but I'm not a huge fan of face Ric Flair. The promos just ain't the same. I'll agree with you on Terry Funk.
Best specific interview is in one interview, the best promo of the entire year. For me, I don't think it's even arguable. Has to go to Lex Luger. It wasn't his first promo he cut after his heel turn. I think it was his second. But Sting comes out and he confronts him, and Lex goes into this, hey, I taught you how to read a wine list. I showed you where to dine, how to work out properly. I taught you nutrition. Basically, he made Sting, and now how dare Sting, insult Luger, and Sting kind of walks off the promo.
The bottom line is, I guess I'm just disappointed.
I guess I understand. A good friend, I can see where you can be very disappointed. And, well, speak of the devil, and out he walks.
Well, I guess we'll find out something right now. Who knows?
I know if anybody in the world can reach the man, I know it's you.
I guess I'm the only one. Maybe we'll do it right now. Let's just see.
Obviously, you heard the comments, Lex. A lot of people are concerned about, quite obviously, the way you conducted yourself in recent weeks.
Let me get this straight. You're disappointed in me. I might expect that from your typical moron who's sitting out here in your studio audience, or your average couch potato sitting there at home who has nothing to do with their time. But Stinger, buddy old pal, we're winners. We're doers. We're not watchers. When you first came into the NWA, I took you under my wing. Oh, shut up. I nurtured you. I brought you along. I allowed you to travel with me. I allowed you to come to the gym with me and work out. So maybe someday you'll have the training techniques and the physique of a total package Lex Luger. I took you to the finest restaurants. I taught you how to read a wine list. I took you and taught you how to dress, what clothes to wear, make you a stylish man of the world. And you're disappointed in me.
Well, first of all, I didn't know that you were allowing me to travel with you or allowing you to have a nice meal with you and things like that. Let me just allow myself to say right now, you just make me sick, pal.
I gotta think that a lot of your former friends, quite candidly, feel that way. I know there's a lot of little kids here tonight, a lot of kids watching at home.
Whoa. A lot of little kids.
Yeah, kids. They look up to you.
It's been backwards all along. You see, you should have all been catering to me. You see, I'm sick and tired of catering, especially those little snot-nosed kids. I'm sick of your petty little intrusions into my life. When I'm eating, when I'm walking through airports, when I'm in hotels. Lex, can I have your autograph? No, you can't. If you have an autograph of Lex Luger, you better frame it, because there will be no more. No more pictures, no more nothing. And all you pretty little girls out there, I am sick and tired of your stupid little flowers, your little love poems. Do you actually think I read those pathetic little things? A man such as myself, who could have the pick of the most exotic, beautiful women that the face of this earth has to offer. Do you really think so? That is so pathetic.
That's not the only thing I hear that's pathetic, in my opinion. I want to tell you something. What about, I know what you think about Sting as your friend, but what about Ricky Steamboat? He never did one bad thing to you in his entire life.
You know, I'm starting to think I have the group Sting and Steamboat in the same boat. They both care too much what these idiots out here think. It's time to put yourself first if you want to be a winner in this sport. It's a rough sport. Ricky Steamboat, you've been living in a fairy tale existence for way, way too long. And I've just woken you up. And if you want to do the smart thing, you avoid Lex Luger, you'll give up your #1 ranking. Because I'm the U.S. champion, I should have been there anyways. So Ricky Steamboat, if you're wondering why, in the middle of the night, your little boy's waking up to sobs, if you wonder why your family has cold chills, it's because of this. Because the total package Lex Luger is the man in this sport today. He is the premier wrestler in our sport today. And they're worried about your health because there is 275 pounds of rock-hard muscle who doesn't care if he has to go around you or through you to get the job done, because I am #1. And there's an old saying, Jim Ross, and it goes like this. Ricky Steamboat, a good big man will beat a good little man any day of the week.
All right. A lot of things are wrong here, and that's one of them. Fans, we'll be back.
And then Luger cuts into everything and everyone, including the fans, and that's where the famous line,
Lex, can I have your autograph? No, you can't.
Came from, and I just easily the best promo of the entire year.
I think it's the most memorable for me because I didn't realize he had this in him, or I didn't even remember this promo. I didn't even know what happened.
Yeah, I'd never heard it before in my life. If I did, I didn't. It was background noise or something.
Yeah, that's pretty much it for me too. So just seeing the heel turn and him get into his natural environment, so to speak. The best part about this whole thing is not what he said. It's believing everything that he was about to say and what he did say. And it exudes. It comes right through the camera. You know this dude's not lying. You know he's not speaking untruths here. This is legit, 100%. This is how I feel. This is how I am. You know this is how I am. And if you looked like I did, you would think the same thing. So the total package is a great gimmick to explain how this promo was. Just excellent job.
Yeah, very authentic, very realistic, because it was, and I thought that's that really what helped. And I never heard a promo flow out of Lex Luger's mouth like that ever, before or again. So it was definitely.
I will say, I wonder if it gave him confidence, because after this promo, I would say 95% of his promos are really good. Like when you hear the first one, you know, the first time he says it, it's really good. And then he gets on a kick for like 2 or 3 weeks where he says the same thing, but it really felt like after he turned heel, his promos went to the next level. And he could have been on that list for best interview of the year, or, you know, best promos of the year, because he did an excellent job too.
We talked about best promo of the year. Let's talk about worst promos of the year. And I hate to even have to say this, because there's a lot of old school territory fans like myself that are going to give me shit for this. But I encourage you. I don't encourage you. I discourage you, but I invite you to go back and listen to 1989 promos of one Michael P.S. Hayes. Easily for me, the worst promo of the year, because he was there all year. He talked all the fucking time for whatever reason. And he just got lazy. He would recite lyrics from songs, and he would just say the same shit every week. It was terrible. And yes, I'm aware that this motherfucker talked people into buildings for years. He sold out the Omni. He sold out, he fucking main evented the Superdome, I think at like fucking 19 or 20 against the Dog. I get that. I understand that he talked people into these buildings. I understand that he feuded with the Von Erichs for over a fucking year straight. selling out the Sportatorium. I'm not questioning that at one point Michael Hayes wasn't one of the best promos in the entire fucking business. However, here in 1989, he gives a flying fuck less. He's not even trying. There's easily the worst shit. Every time I saw him getting on this went on all year. This started as a baby face. He turned heel and it never got any better. And even at the end of the year, it's like, oh no, he's still talking. Oh my God.
This is going to shock you, but I will say Ricky Steamboat is a really close runner-up here.
It doesn't
I
shock
know he
me.
wasn't there all year.
It doesn't shock me.
No, the fact that I'm about to defend Michael Hayes a little bit. I get it, he stole lyrics. He didn't give a shit. But when Steamboat comes out after Ric Flair just bags on his whole family and says, sorry for interrupting you.
That was funk. Yeah, that was funk.
Whoever it was.
Yeah.
Like that to me, totally... That's mind-boggling. Dude's bagging your entire family, your 1-year-old son, and you come out. Sorry for interrupting you. Like, dude, come on. That's the absolute worst promo of the entire year. All consistently sucking Michael Hayes for sure. Worst promo of the year is Steamboat apologizing for interrupting a guy who did shit all over his entire family.
Yeah.
You're too nice.
Talk about that before
you are very too nice, Rick.
Yeah, way too nice. Way too nice. Worst booked / most misused / underutilized award. You could argue that it could have went to Ranger Ross. I felt he was underutilized, most misused. They didn't really give him what they could have given him to make him into something more than what he eventually became. But for me, obviously, worst booked, he has to go to Eddie Gilbert and Missy Hyatt here. First, they were misused as baby faces from the get-go, as far as I was concerned, when they stuck Missy back with Eddie. That's not really a heel duo. But finally, when it got over and it started working, they kind of took Eddie out of the scenario. Flair got pissed at him, started using him as basically a job guy for the last 4 months of the year, and took Missy off TV. So I don't think anybody can really argue. Terrible decisions here, politics involved, and easily the most misused Missy Hyatt and Eddie Gilbert.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% there.
Missed opportunities with what they could have done with them as heels, I still feel. Biggest surprise of the year for me, and this isn't a biggest surprise in an angle or a storyline, or biggest surprise that I didn't realize or I never knew or whatever. The biggest surprise to me was when I found out Kevin Sullivan was a member of Doom. And not that he was involved in the angle and the limo, but just that they actually continued that. And he came out to ringside with him a couple times, and he cut promos with him. And then he even explained why he was no longer a member of Doom. So that really shocked me that went on for that longer period of time that Kevin Sullivan was in Doom.
Same here. I think the biggest surprise out of all that is the fact that they explained away why he's no longer with them.
Right.
Instead of just him disappearing when they come out, they actually let him cut a promo to explain why he wants no part of Doom. So that was my biggest surprise as well. I didn't realize he was in there. Yeah.
Best super card of the year for me was the Great American Bash 89. I've always said it's one of my favorite pay-per-views of all times, and it still stays that way here. We did a watch-along of it. Really had a blast doing that. But easily one of the best super cards of all time, so easily the best pay-per-view here. Best super card. That includes pay-per-views and clashes here in 1989. Worst super card was the St. Valentine's Massacre from Cleveland. That's Clash 5. Ugh. The entire card was atrocious. They did the Flair Steamboat angle instead of having them do some type of a match. The main event was supposed to be a 6-man tag, and then the babyfaces got locked in the locker room. So the Roadies and Tenryu, or whoever the hell it was, or the Varsity Club came out and wrestled the Roadies and Tenryu for like 2 minutes before Sting, Hayes, and the Dog, which I don't know if that's a lot better, break through the locker room, and they come out, and we get a brawl to end the show. We don't even get our main event. It was terrible. It was George Scott. It was atrocious. So my favorite supercard this year, Bash 89. My least favorite, Clash 5.
Yeah, Clash 5 sucks. Best overall show for sure is definitely the Bash 89. So many good matches, so many great, booking leading into that. My favorite card of the entire year is Clash 7 for whatever reason. I still don't know why I like that show.
Biggest disappointment of the year for me was Steamboat quitting right in the middle of the hot Steamboat and Luger feud. Money was to be made there, and he just up and leaves because things aren't panning out the way he being Bonnie, wants it to, which also leads me into a tie-in award, the biggest bitch award. It could go to Mike Blackwell for no selling the skyscrapers. It could go to George Scott for nearly putting the fucking NWA out of business. It could go to Jim Herd for being a complete buffoon at times. But for me, the biggest bitch of this year, Bonnie Steamboat, who ruined Ricky Steamboat's career, if you ask me. And that goes along with the biggest disappointment, which was Steamboat quitting.
I agree with the disappointment because, like you said, that feud was hot. It had heel and face attributes, and just the angle was great. Like you said, it added fire to Steamboat that we didn't get with Steamboat and Flair. But my biggest bitch is I'm gonna go with George Scott.
Well, I can see that. It's definitely.
I mean, it's tough. It's tough.
Definitely in that list
because of Jim Herd too. Just some of the stupid shit that he like Starrcade really. Out of all of it, like booking Starrcade when you have all these hot angles and these guys that are super over, and you put them in a shitty tournament. I mean, that's a bitch move.
Yeah, well, that's why all their names were on there. They all belong on there. And really Bonnie getting herself on TV, trying to be the second coming of Elizabeth, and those fucking dresses with that fucking kid, all of the whole damn thing. She just annoyed the piss out of me. And then, of course, she up and causes Steamboat to leave the company. On top of all of that, she's just a bitch throughout the year, as far as I was concerned. Best announced team, I gave this to Jim Ross and Bob Caudle, though I love Lance Russell and Bob Caudle on Pro. They didn't really do anything too big. I like JR and Caudle. They did a lot of the clashes and pay-per-views for the first 8-9 months of the year, so I thought they deserved that there. It's sad, we didn't get a lot of Jim Ross and Cornette outside of the Power Hour, and mostly that was hosting instead of actually doing commentary together. And then we had that very brief run with Jim Ross and Magnum at the beginning of the year. Just when it seemed like Magnum was starting to click, they yanked him off the show. We never saw him again because he was Dusty's boy and Dusty was gone. I don't think we saw Magnum again for the rest of the year after that.
Yeah, I really liked Magnum. Wahoo wasn't bad those 2 weeks he was out there too.
Yeah, that was an odd one. Just randomly out of nowhere, they just threw Wahoo in there. I think that was a Flair thing, though. Of course, Flair loves Wahoo, one of the guys he really looked up to in the business. And, the story goes when Flair broke his back in that plane crash, you couldn't break kayfabe back then, even when something like that happened. And Wahoo said, fuck it, and went right into the hospital. And they told him, you can't go in there. He's a heel. You're a face. He said, fuck you. That's my friend. I'm going to go right in there and go check on him and things like that. So you can see how close Wahoo and Flair always were. That goes back, to the early to mid 70s. So.
Yeah. I didn't mind Wahoo. I thought he was cool for that week or two.
I think in small doses, a lot of these guys worked. I thought Sully and Ross was okay for the couple weeks they were together on the show too. So.
Yeah.
But Jim Ross's name is basically in every fucking announce team because he was on every fucking announce team besides Lance Russell and Bob Caudle. I think the only thing we never got was Lance Russell and Jim Ross, which may have been pretty damn awesome, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that would have been good.
Biggest flop / worst gimmick. It could go to Norman. It could go to the Dynamic Dudes. It could go to the Yamazaki Corporation. It could go to the Ding Dongs. Who do you give them to, Steve?
I'm giving them to the Dudes.
It was a pretty.
Remember when we saw the Ding
gimmick.
Dongs' second match or something?
Third match, I think it was.
The second or third match, how they were really into it. They were trying to get it over. I think it's when they stopped wearing all the bells on their shit.
Yeah, and they made it more of a match, and everything just started clicking a little better. Yep, I remember.
And you made that comment, like, this would be a great opening gimmick at house shows to get the crowd into it, to get the kids into it, and that sort of stuff. And the Dudes didn't even have that. You put them on first, everybody's going to go to the concession stand and miss the first match. So that's not what you want as an opener. Yeah. So I'm going to give it to the Dudes.
I'll give it to the Dudes as well. They never worked the gimmick. The gimmick was awful to begin with. Shame on you, Jim Ross. I get what you were trying to go for there, but
wrong guys.
Right.
I think the gimmick would work if you had the right people in it.
Yeah, I think it could with the right people. Those were not the right people.
Right,
yeah. Those were not the right people. Most improved, I gave that to Ron Simmons. I thought he really got good over the course of the year. He really started impressing on his moves and whatnot. There weren't a lot of other guys that really stepped it up or up their game. So to me, most improved went to Ron Simmons. He deserved it, and he obviously gets better as time goes on. Most unintentionally funny moments, Steve, you kind of pointed this out earlier already. It was Steamboat apologizing to Terry Funk for interrupting Terry Funk's promo while Terry Funk was bashing his bastard child and his whore of a wife. Funk's out there cutting a promo, like just laying into Steamboat's family, his little shit, snot-nosed 1-year-old kid and his tramp of a wife. And Steamboat comes out to confront him, and the first thing out of his mouth is, "I'm sorry to interrupt your interview time, but I don't like what you're saying." It's a fucking hilarious Steamboat there. So to me, that was most unintentionally funny moment of the year.
I'm no doubt about that.
Best turn. We saw Ric Flair do the heel to face turn de facto after Terry Funk drops him on the table. Lex Luger turning on Steamboat. Cornette and the Midnights going heel on the dudes. Or Teddy Long's referee heel turn. You could even argue here, best turn of the year for you.
Lex Luger.
Yeah, it's hard for me to say here. I don't know. I feel like Flair was forced turned. I feel like the Teddy Long turn. I mean, Teddy did a good job starting to cut promos, but after a while, the Norman stuff went nowhere. So when you look back, it doesn't really have the same legs on it. It's really hard because I think the Cornette and Midnight's turn got more of a reaction than any of these. Believe it, that's just how much people hate the dudes, to be honest with you. It's hard for me to give a best turn here. I think Luger's turn on Steamboat was probably the most impactful storyline-wise outside of Funk. I don't know. I don't know. It's hard. I'll let you just go. I'll let you pick that one. You go with Luger over Steamboat. We'll go that way because it's really hard for me to say because I even though the dudes are trash, that Cornette Midnights, I can't deny the crowd, the pop. I mean, I popped with that crowd when they popped that loud for that turn. It was just, everything was let out. It's like, oh, thank God they're heels again. But yeah, probably Lex Luger and Steamboat.
I'm with you. Like you said, the impactful. Lex Luger turning heel changed the entire year for him. And I think it is more meaningful. I mean, Cornette turning, if it was against any other team, would it have the same impact? I don't necessarily think so.
Best surprise return. We saw Ole return as a Terminator for Halloween Havoc. We saw Ricky Steamboat make the big return way back in January as Eddie Gilbert's mystery partner. And we saw Arn Anderson return at the beginning of December after leaving the WWF to help out the Horseman, or his former Horseman mate, Ric Flair, on World Championship Wrestling. For me, I had to give it to Steamboat. It was just the biggest name or the biggest surprise. It was huge. It played into a trilogy of legendary matches. Though, don't get me wrong, that Arn Anderson return got a hell of a pop.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Ricky Steamboat as well.
We have
don't want to discredit Arn's pop, though. Sorry about that.
No, definitely not. No, he was over for a few weeks there. I mean, on that level, that pop. He got that pop for a few weeks there on all those Southern crowds, too, after he returned. So Arn was, it was a huge deal. But Steamboat, man, it was Steamboat and Flair. So it worked.
Yep.
We've seen so many managers come and go over the year. We started off with guys like Paul Jones and J.J. Dillon. We ended up with guys like Hiro Matsuda at one point, unfortunately. Oliver Humperdinck's been in twice. First with Bam Bam, then with the Samoans. Lord Littlebrook. Paul Ellering. Teddy Long became a manager. Woman. Missy Hyatt, obviously. Paulie Dangerously. Jim Cornette. But I had to give this to Gary Hart simply, even though we said, he didn't have the best promos for a long period of time there the first half of the year when he was really doing nothing but doing the racist Bob. I hate to call Bob Orton the racist because Orton never actually was the racist. It was Gary Hart cutting the promos and Bob Orton going, "Yeah, daddy." So it's more towards Gary Hart. But man, once Muda took off and he had a direction, Gary Hart knew what to do and he did it. And since he just went into the WWE Hall of Fame tonight, that gives you an idea of how close we're recording this to when it actually comes out. I had to give this to Gary Hart just because he was with Muda and he had J-Tex and it was probably the most meaningful. Maybe if Jim Cornette had something to do all year long, he would have probably have won this, but there was long periods where Cornette just had nothing to do. So I had to go Gary Hart here as manager of the year in my eyes.
Yeah, you really can't talk NWA 1989 without talking about Gary Hart. I'm going to give a shout out to Paul Ellering. I love his promos. I mean, the Roadies don't need a manager, but man, he really, really enhances that whole gimmick. And I love his promos. Animals yelling, hawks all over the place, and then you get this. He has a deep voice, but it's soft spoken in the sense that he's not yelling, he's not shouting, he's just telling you like it is, and there's nothing you can do about it. So shout out to Paul Ellering, he's awesome too.
I'm going to run through a few here. Steve, you can touch on whichever ones you want once I get done, and we can continue on to the very end of the show. Worst angle for me was Gary Hart's racist tirades against Dick Murdoch during the Murdoch and Bob Orton feud, talking about Murdoch's made-up Mexican wife and all of the nonsense that came out of Gary Hart's mouth during the worst angle / feud of the year. I'm sure, I don't know if you agree. Yeah, it was pretty bad. Overachiever. The man who got more over than he had any right to. I felt that was Rick Steiner on his own in singles. Rick Steiner really overly achieved here in 1989, to say the least. Especially with what he was handed during the George Scott era.
He survived Steiner Watch rather quickly.
He did. Referee of the year has to go to Tommy Young. We only had about 2 referees, and it was like Tommy Young and Teddy Long. There was Tommy Young and Nick Patrick. And then, I don't know who came out. Was it Mike Atkins at the end, or am I confusing it with Monday Warfare? Okay.
It's Mike Atkins.
Unfortunately, Tommy gets that injury at the beginning of December, and he's done. His career's over with, at least his full-time career is over with. He'd returned briefly there in the WWF in 98. But Tommy Young's gone, and probably, maybe arguably, the best referee of all time. Certainly up there as one of the best referees of all time. So it makes only good sense here to make him referee of the year. Tommy Young, God, man, they call him the sliding referee because of the way he would just get into position any which way to count the 3 count. But, man, he had to have taken as many bumps as the wrestlers here in 89, and unfortunately, by the end of the year, he paid for it.
Yep.
Underachiever. As in a guy who didn't do nearly as much as I expected, and that had to go to the Gator, Scott Hall, who got some vignettes, who got some promo time, and who got a slew of matches and was just terrible at everything he did here. And it's really shocking because he's been in the business 5 years at this point.
That's crazy.
Like, what was he doing in the AWA all those fucking years? And he was in Crockett, near the beginning as well, but when he was like in his heyday with Kurt Hennig and things like that in the AWA, what in the hell was he doing? Because this was just awful. And it was apparent they wanted to push him because, my God, look at the look that he had. But, man, just easily one of the biggest disappointments of the year.
I agree. He only had that one good match with Terry Funk when he got the shit beat out of him in Amarillo.
The most likely to succeed award, the Sky's the Limit award. Pun intended there, as I give it to Brian Pillman. I noted other guys like Sid Vicious and Doom easily most likely to succeed in the future based on looking at him here. Sid he was gone. He was out with an injury, so I kind of took the award away there. Brian Pillman, man, looks like $1 million, and he is on fire here. He is, for as immobile as he was near the end of his career, he is all over the place here. He is just fucking phenomenal in 1989.
Yep. I agree with you there.
The Groan Award. See, it keeps going back to the same couple
Michael
guys
Hayes.
here. Okay. The Groan Award. Which guy makes you groan more when they come on your TV screen? And immediately I narrowed that down to Tommy Rich and Michael Hayes. I, too, had to give that to Michael Hayes. So Michael Hayes winning up all the wrong awards here tonight as we close out the year.
At least he can tag out,
And these are the awards. These are just fun awards I'm tossing out here. You can comment at the end. I'm just running through them really fast because they're more just for fun. Honorable mentions, kind of participation trophy style awards to get these guys their names on the show. The Bad to the Bone Award, because even though both these guys are dead, I don't want them pissed off at me. So splitting the Bad to the Bone Award are Dr. Death Steve Williams and Terry Bam Bam Gordy. The Oof, That's Got a Hoyt Award could go to Jerry Price after taking that backdrop into the ropes by the SST. Dwayne Bruce getting pressed by Sid Vicious, bouncing off the ropes and the apron down to the floor. Lee Scott also versus Sid Vicious, just basically getting manhandled. Mike Blackwell getting shot on after shooting, no selling, the Skyscrapers. I gave it to Danny Marlowe because I just feel like maybe he died when he took that German.
Him or Jerry Price.
Jerry Price, yeah. But Jerry Price continued the match and then wrestled again. We never saw Danny Marlowe again. So,
but man, just the visual of him damn near looking like he's about to die.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my God.
But I gave it to Danny Marlowe.
Actually died. Price looked like he was going to die.
With the German suplex Rick Steiner on Marlowe, the 400-pound Marlowe on the back of his head. I don't know if he did. If he didn't get crippled, I don't know how he didn't. Most vicious, most dangerous man award, aka the softball award, has to go to Sid Vicious here, who just didn't give a fuck and beat the shit out of guys. I mean, look at the Oof That's Got a Hoyt award. It's Dwayne Bruce versus Sid, Lee Scott versus Sid, Mike Blackwell versus the Skyscraper. Sid's involved in a lot of these matches. I don't think that's by fucking accident. So the most vicious award goes to Sid Vicious. The Gentleman's Award goes to Ricky Steamboat. Again, it goes back to that promo. Even when you talk shit about his family, he apologizes for interrupting your promo. So the Gentleman's Award goes to Ricky Steamboat. The Boing Award, no doubt. That has to go to a Missy Hyatt.
Woman's cleavage, though. Whew.
Well, woman gets the court. Missy,
Well,
that was Missy's gimmick first, so she wins it for me.
all right.
Woman does get the Strut That Ass Award, a.k.a. the Jekyll and Hyde Award, or Jekyll and Hyde being Robin Green, and then woman later on. I had to give her an award, so I had to come up with something, and she did come out to strut there near the end for a bit. The Golden Pineapple Award, there's the Razzie Awards out there, so I gave out the Golden Pineapple Award to the SST because I loved it when they used to come to the ring with the pineapples and smash them over the jobbers' heads, so I really missed that. If they were really regressing, you think they would have went back to the pineapple shit. The One Hitter Quitter Award, as in came in for one match and left. I had to go with Eddie Guerrero, who had a solid TV match with Terry Funk all the way back in 1989. The Most Redneck Award goes to Captain Redneck Dick Murdoch. The Dirtiest Dick Award, well, it was a kind of a toss-up, but since Murdoch got the Most Redneck Award, the Dirtiest Dick goes to Dick Slater. The Chopper Award goes out to Steve Casey, who R.I.P., it was fun trying to figure out what the hell that nickname stood for. We tried for months, and we still don't know, but I'm not quitting. I'm still going to continue to ask that question. Anytime I run into somebody online that may have encountered Steve Casey in the locker room. But the Chopper Award goes to Steve Casey. And last but not least, the Counterfeit Award, as in not a golden trophy at all, Steve, rather a chocolate wrapped in gold foil. The Counterfeit Award goes to Mr. Counterfeit himself, Kendall Windham. And that wraps up all of the awards here in 1989.
Quite the list there. But we made it. It's over.
That will be it for, that's it for 1989. We really dissected it and we took it apart, and man, all the working parts, all the moving parts inside the NWA, we looked at it from the booking to the wrestling and everything in between. And it's all over and done with. So a reminder, guys, that's it. It's over. But we'll be back very soon with the WWF, the 1993 in the World Wrestling Federation, to be exact. And I've already posted a few videos on YouTube, on Twitter, and shortly on Facebook. I want you guys to go check those out. You can follow us on Twitter at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. I'll continue to post videos and things of that nature on there. And yes, we'll continue doing sound bites with the WWF in 1993 on those shows. I already grabbed a few fun ones for some of the early shows we're going to be doing. Covering January and things of that nature. The plan right now is to kind of break down the fallout next episode of 1992 moving into 1993, figuring out the structure, the landscape, the wrestlers, and everything else going on. And then in 2 weeks, 2 episodes in, we'll take on January 1993. But next episode's going to be fun because we're just going to really dissect everything moving in to 1993. Where the hell the WWF is at right now. Where Vince McMahon's head is at right now. And it's going to be a fun one, though. So you guys keep checking back. Look for the videos. I've been posting some obscure things already, some fun things, some great memories from my youth. I tell a little story with some of the videos, too, when I post them. You can go on YouTube, look up the Wrestling Memory Grenade on YouTube. Again, please go on Facebook, follow us, like us there, and follow us there. I promise I'll start adding the videos there as well. I've already added a couple of them over on Facebook as well. So we're trying to get out everywhere social media is. I haven't done the Instagram thing yet. We do have an account there. Maybe in due time. But Steve, man, we did it. We're done with 1989 and the NWA. It's on to 1993 and the WWF.
Yeah, and our first giveaway for WWF 1993.
Oh, that's right. We bypassed that. What is our first giveaway?
If you want to give them a drum roll, we'll hit them up with what we're going to give away
give
first.
A drum roll. That's what are we going to do here? 1993 in the WWF, our very first free prize giveaway. Tell them, Steve.
We got you a Bret Hart 8x10. Look forward to that. I'll get you some pictures and we can get that up tomorrow.
Would that be an autographed Bret Hart 8x10?
It is an autographed 8x10.
Okay, just wanted to be sure for anybody out there that was curious, answering questions before they're asked. It just saves us time later. So very cool. Bret Hart, who was the world champion at the time, WWF champion. Yes. 5-time WWF champion?
Yes.
Bret Hart. So that very, very cool. Cool way to start out the year in the WWF 1993. Bret Hart was the champion then, and an autographed 8x10 of the Hitman. We'll put the pictures up on Twitter, and I'll have it up on Facebook as well, so you guys check back and look for it. Might already be up by the time you see this. I can't promise you that, but it'll be up this week. Remember, you got to follow us on Twitter in order to win it, though, at Wrestling Grenade. So follow us on Twitter, and I think for the free prize giveaway, what say you? We'll give them Royal Rumble watch-along, do the giveaway, or do you want to do it earlier than that?
Royal Rumble watch along sounds good to me.
Okay, guys, so in about 3 weeks' time, we'll announce the winner. So and you have 3 weeks to find us on Twitter and follow us in order to enter and win a free autographed Bret Hart 8x10. So very, very cool stuff, Steve. Really appreciate you doing that for the people. And we'll be back, guys, with our next episode. It's the WWF 1993. It's going to be another journey. It's going to move a little faster. Steve knows his 1993 WWF pretty well, so it's not going to require as much deep diving and searching and memorizing of things. So it's going to be a fun one, though.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Steve, appreciate it, man. 32 episodes it took, but we got through it. We're done with the NWA 1989. Appreciate you being here for the last 30-some-odd weeks.
Yeah, I've been happy to be here, man. It's been fun. I know more now than I ever did before this started, so that's the goal. So thanks.
Yeah, and
thank you on behalf of all the listeners.
Hey, I consider myself pretty well versed in things, but I learned a few things myself. So I'm certainly, that's always a plus for me too. Now, what I'm going to learn in 93, I don't know. I do know that I've probably forgotten some things that it's going to be a refresher to me and really make me pop. I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that. I already did that once today. Just going, putting some videos up. Shawn Michaels, Jim Runzel match that brought back a fond memory from the good old days. But yeah, you guys go on, check us out on social media. We'll be back very soon here. The Wrestling Memory Grenade, episode 33, kicks off the WWF in 1993.
Promotional consideration paid for by the following.
We'd like to thank our loyal fan base of listeners as you guys continue to listen, download, and subscribe to shows. We can't thank you guys enough, and please continue to spread the word and retweet all the posts from our Twitter account to help the brand continue to grow. Of course, all of our shows are available on WrestleCopia.com, but you can also find The Grenade on all of your favorite podcast streaming apps. We're available on Apple, Spotify, Google Pod, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Amazon, iHeartRadio, you name it, and we're probably there. And a reminder that you too can win free prizes as listeners of The Grenade as part of our continuous free prize giveaway offers. All you have to do is follow us on Twitter at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. It's that simple. Be a follower of The Grenade and you're automatically entered in each and every free prize giveaway contest. As always, we encourage you to stop on over to our very own Patreon account, which you can find at patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where we offer an insane 14 tiers of goodies with prices available for everyone's price range. Prices start as low as $1, a $1 tier, to simply show your support of the fledgling podcast network. Or you can select our $5 tier, the All Access tier, which is always offering up rare goodies, as well as complete access to our entire watch-along series, featuring prior WWF and WCW pay-per-views and special events that make a great complimentary piece to our Monday Warfare podcast. We're also making our way through the entire WWF Coliseum video series as a watch-along project on Patreon. Other shows in our watch-along series include episodes of WWF Saturday Night's Main Event, the classic Steamboat vs. Ric Flair 1-hour match from Clash of the Champions 6, and so much more. We're always adding new content and shows to the watch-along series as part of the all-access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That's $5 for the all-access tier. And again, we thank all of our loyal listeners for everything you've done. And with all of that out of the way, it's that time again. Time to say goodbye, but we will return next week. And until that time, this is Ray Russell, and for my co-host Steven Eckstadt saying, from pillar to post and coast to coast, you pull the pin, and we'll pick up the pieces right here on the Wrestling Memory Grenade. See you next week. Don't miss it. Be there.
It plays little howdy doody on your coconut. Ho, ho.
No.
Halloween Havoc, 89.
And you pay attention. You are an idiot. Ow! Right in the schnoz.